Are you good? Are you settled in?
Oh, yeah.
You need any more time?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Something going on?
Nice of you to join us, buddy.
It's not a big day or anything. It's not like we just had the biggest day in football of the calendar year.
I didn't want to get pulled over. There was a cop sitting behind me the whole way. I was taking it very, very slowly on the way into work today.
Okay. Not that you should have left a touch earlier.
No, I mean, I think I've got this thing down to a science.
Oh, clearly not.
At this point in time, until there's our wonderful Metro Nashville Police Department, law enforcement representatives out there keeping the streets safe from people like me who are whipping into work because I live, less than a mile basically from where we work, which makes being late even more inexcusable.
Now, clearly it's a good strategy to leave at a time to where any single hiccup would make you late. That does seem like something conducive to success.
More often than not, it is a successful plan, but it just so happens today it was not a successful plan. Good morning. We got a lot to dive into from this particular game because, to Lucas's point, the only reason that he's upset that I'm late is because he's just given all of his stats off the top, and now he's got nothing else for the rest of the show.
I got a few more.
But I am curious, because we talked about this, right? Everybody said Chiefs because I don't want to be wrong betting the Eagles and
That's
just be completely, I think everybody in the room anyway. I don't know about the audience. I don't know how everybody felt going into the game, but let's just take it from this perspective. If you would have picked the Philadelphia Eagles, that is not an illogical choice. The Philadelphia Eagles are a really excellent football team. Top to bottom, there is not one place where I would pick the Chiefs roster over the Eagles except for one position.
I would slightly disagree with that, but I get your overall premise.
What's the other?
I think the Chiefs' offensive line has played better than the Eagles' offensive line in pass protection. I think they're almost dead even. And the Eagles' offensive line I had concerns about because they were banged up coming into this thing. Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, so I took that into account. But there are other positions where the Chiefs are very close. I think special teams I gave to the Chiefs as well.
Special teams I would hear you on, but for the most part,
no, there's no question. The Eagles have a better roster.
Offensive line situation on the whole year, and in that particular game, there was no question. The Eagles kicked ass in the trenches, offensively, defensively. It wasn't close. The game was over by halftime, to Lucas's point, and the only reason to keep watching beyond the halftime show, which I'm sure people have opinions on today, and we can talk about that maybe at the end of the show. There's a lot of football stuff to get to out of the last football game of the season. But the game was over by halftime. The only reason to watch through the halftime show was, they still have the best quarterback. It's still Patrick Mahomes. There's still, to your point, the idea of 28-3 looming there with Tom Brady sitting in the booth. We can also talk about Brady on the broadcast last night. They can do this. I've seen them do this before. But it just never happened. And that's such a rare thing to experience on the side of the Chiefs. Both things can be true in this game. This was one of Patrick Mahomes' worst games ever. It was one of the Philadelphia defense's best games of the year. I mean, given the implications, you would argue that it is the best game that they played all year long as a defensive unit to go above and beyond, because it wasn't just about the pass rush. I mean, nobody was coming open. You saw Andy Reid using a couple of tricks and tools that they deploy to try and basically identify what the Eagles were doing on defense. Let me see how I can poke and prod you for a couple of series, and then by the third or fourth series, we'll get it going. We'll find our footing. We're the Chiefs. We know how to do this. But 3 consecutive punts to start the game. The fourth possession is when he threw the pick 6, and they just never recovered.
Yeah, 17 points off turnovers in an 18-point victory. Although I almost hate that the Chiefs strung together those last 2 garbage time touchdowns, because it kind of takes away, at least from the final score, from what was one of the greatest defensive performances in the Super Bowl in our lifetime.
40-22 is a lie. It was actually 40-6.
It was 40-6. It was incredibly reminiscent of that Broncos-Seahawks Super Bowl 11 years ago, where the Broncos were 2-point favorites going in, and the Chiefs were 1.5-point favorites going into this game. So, yeah, I love that D-Hop got his Super Bowl touchdown But
I don't know.
Those last two, I don't know how much.
What's he going to remember more? The drop?
Sure. Oh, yeah. No.
The early drop.
What an odd play that was, where it was like an optical illusion, where it looked like a tough catch, but also a catch that D-Hop should make 10 times out of 10. Just it's such an odd game to watch from the Chiefs' perspective.
Well, because Mahomes was on the run, and he finally got one that away, and it wasn't a perfect pass. Like, Pat can put that ball in your chest at basically every angle, and it was just slightly off, and it happened to be one of the few times, even at an advanced age, DeAndre Hopkins and drops is not something that you associate with. I know it starts to happen more and more as your physical abilities lessen, but he's still incredibly reliable more times out of. It's just one of those games. This is what makes the amount of time that we spend trying to make sense of an entire season, when it just so often boils down to what happened in any one individual result. That is one of the worst games the Chiefs as a team will ever play. It's one of the best games that Philadelphia will ever play. And it just so happened to happen at the same time in the most important game of the year.
Yeah,
because nobody thought Chiefs were going to be uncompetitive or not competitive. The offense never got it going. They weren't disrupting. I mean, there's some numbers on Jaylen Hurts when facing four-man pressure without the blitz. Excellent.
Yeah, diced him up.
Excellent. And that's, the story of the day should be the Eagles. I know that I'm looking up as immediately as I say that, I look up at First Take, and the lead is how disappointing was the Chiefs' Super Bowl performance. Today is about Philadelphia. It wasn't a good game. It was a terrible game. I got up and stopped paying attention at some point with like 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there was never
started doing things right around the house. I stopped, I wasn't locked in on the game anymore because you had to start thinking about, all right, what the hell? This was a dominant performance by Philadelphia. That's the headline. The fact that the Chiefs just went MIA for the most important game of the year in ways that you couldn't possibly expect is the secondary today.
It was cool to see all the ways the Eagles have upgraded since that Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs 2 years ago, having such a direct impact on this game. All of the personnel changes on defense, one of the best coordinator upgrades on both sides of the ball that we've seen year to year in the NFL, going from Brian Johnson to Kellen Moore on offense, and then Sean Desai to Vic Fangio on defense. And just the ultimate team performance from the Eagles to where you didn't even have that moment where it was, if there's a comeback, here we go. This is where it's going to be.
Terry Bradshaw was selling it heading into halftime, right? He's just like, any big play, any. I get what he's saying. Like, these things happen in games all the time, all year long. You could point to a game where you felt like a team was dead in the water, and then at halftime, the script completely flipped. But it just, there was no point to what you're saying, Lucas, where it felt like Philadelphia took their foot off the Chiefs' neck, and certainly not that pass rush. I know Hurts had an excellent performance, and I don't want to do that's not a deserving MVP today. But if you'd have told me that Josh Sweat would have won MVP, it would have been also completely believable. Like, I thought he was as good at what he was doing last night. And also, somebody who I didn't hear a single person mention in the lead up to that game except for Greg Cosell. Milton Williams, a defensive tackle that probably, I'd argue 75% of the NFL consuming public has no idea who Milton Williams is. And Greg was talking about him in the podcast leading up because he was not just hugely impactful in that game. He's been a good player all year long, even though Jalen Carter gets the headlines.
It's just the nature of the game right now, right? That if a team dominates in that fashion, unless a defensive player, score. If Josh Sweat had a scoop and score, he'd be the MVP. But quarterback had 3 total touchdowns. He was efficient in the passing game. He's going to win MVP 10 times out of 10. But I don't know. It just kind of encapsulated a complete team performance by the Eagles. I was fine with Hurts winning MVP. It's a cool story. It's crazy to think where he was just, 7 years ago at halftime of that national championship game against Georgia.
Doesn't feel that long ago, but I guess it has been.
That was the 2017 season and that electric game in Atlanta against Georgia to now Super Bowl MVP. So I'm not mad at Jaylen Hurts winning MVP, but there's no question how much they benefited. Again, 17 points off of turnovers in an 18-point victory, which is misleading because the Chiefs scored 2 garbage time touchdowns. Chiefs did not have a drive before those last 2 scores when the game's over. I mean,
the Eagles stopped caring.
Yeah, they like three minutes left. They scored with DeAndre Hopkins. With 2:54 on the clock when that DeAndre Hopkins touchdown cut it to 40-14. But before that point, the Chiefs didn't have a drive of longer than 5 plays.
Yeah.
5 plays. Unbelievable. I didn't think that was possible. Did not think that was possible for an offense like the Kansas City Chiefs that doesn't even rely on the big play. It's not like they're a big play offense.
No, not all through the postseason. It's been something that they've had better performances in the postseason even than they did during the regular season, right? Because we've been talking about this for 2 seasons. All right, at what point are the Chiefs going to come up short because they don't have as much as they used to? You have to make certain adjustments when you've had as much success as they do and you lose as many pieces and parts as they have. And it just finally, in some way, shape, or form, ran out of gas because Mahomes had to be the best player in every game for the Chiefs this year. Had no choice. That's just the way that they're built. And you understand that. Once you start to have to make the financial adjustments that come with that level of success, your roster's going to look a lot different. You're going to ask your quarterback, who you know is capable of elevating any team beyond what it should be capable of as just the sum of its parts. That quarterback is going to help put you over the top. And on an off night for Patrick Mahomes, a rare off night for Patrick Mahomes, they completely took away his ability to be the best player on the field. This, to your point about Hurts, I like this tweet that I saw this morning. It was from last night, Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports on Twitter. Jaylen Hurts, fantastic story for what it takes to be a champion. Freshman phenom who came up just short, benched for Tua Tagovailoa during a title run, doubted NFL prospect, and then ended up going to the Philadelphia Eagles in the second round. Doubted NFL starter, loses Super Bowl despite epic game, eventual Super Bowl MVP. So again, congratulations to Jaylen Hurts. They're burning Kermit the Frog stuffed animals in Philadelphia because that's what Patrick Mahomes sounds like. It was a scene in Philly, a scene in New Orleans, a very heavily favored Philadelphia crowd, because I guess Chiefs fans, it costs a lot of money to go to as many Super Bowls as they've been going to in the last couple of years. Philly obviously taking advantage, and that is the way that the Eagles got it done last night. Now, Titans fans should love the way that the Eagles won that Super Bowl, and I'll explain why. We'll also take your phone calls. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It's a 3rd and 16 for the Chiefs, and a shotgun snap from their own 24. Rolling out of the pocket, Mahomes lines up. It's intercepted at the 40, and picked off by DeJean, who comes to the near side, the 30. Got a block at the 20, breaks a tackle, the 10, the 5, to the pylon. Touchdown! Eagles have got a pick six.
Oof. Cooper DeJean. Saquon Barkley got all the love for it being his birthday on Super Bowl night. I had no idea it was Cooper DeJean's birthday until he got the pick.
Yeah, I don't think anybody did.
That's his first career interception.
In the NFL. Yeah, it's amazing. 22nd birthday. Pretty good for a kid from South Dakota.
38 yards to the end zone with a Patrick Mahomes pass. That was the 4th possession for the Chiefs, and that basically, I mean, not that it ended the game essentially, because there was a great deal more of the game to be played, but Mahomes was uncomfortable all night, under duress all night, turnovers all night, and DeJean there to capitalize on the first one to further that Eagles lead. 40-22 was the final. Was never that close. We'll take your phone calls on this here in just a second. 615-737-1045. The number. We'll also talk about why Titans fans should love the way that Philadelphia won that game. But I'm going to remind you that the Combine is coming up. Football season over, but football season not really over for us around here. And we've got a ton of draft coverage coming for you over the next couple of months. But we're going to the Combine. Before each team selects their picks, they'll evaluate over 300 prospects at the Combine in Indy. The show is going to be live from Indianapolis thanks to Wholesale Supply. You can listen in as we're going to have all manner of great analysts, coaches, GMs from around the league with us to talk about the upcoming draft class. For more information on our coverage from Indy, visit 1045thezone.com. So let's take some phone calls on last night's game. How about Steve?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Good morning. So I didn't have a dog in the hunt last night, but think about this, and this is why Titans fans should be going, I don't want to hear any more about a quarterback, because it doesn't matter if Patrick Mahomes is our quarterback. If they're behind Dylan Radins, Joe Tooney is not a tackle. I don't think it was Frank Caliendo, but someone actually said last night, look, Frank Caliendo, it's Calientus. But my point is, you need to fix this line of scrimmage. I don't care if Will Levis, Mahomes, Buck, I don't care if you're the quarterback playing for this team. So the Titans fans really should take a look at it and go, trade out of that one pick, and let's go fix all of our holes at once.
Thanks for the call, Steve. Yeah, we'll drill down on that point here in this segment, because it's one thing. So, like, let's look at it this way: the quarterback situation, the upcoming quarterback situation. It's entirely possible that Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders can go on to have very successful NFL careers. We have no idea what they're going to be as pros. There's no point in rushing to judgment. Obviously, they're being evaluated right now, but it's still an educated guess. It's still a gamble. The question that Titans fans have to ask themselves at this point, watching that game, is what's the best path to being in a game like last night? Not like you're competing for Super Bowl 60. We understand that there's going to be a learning curve here as they try and dig themselves out of this hole. And maybe they're not as far away as 3-14 made them look, but we've got last year's sample size to work with. We don't know how much time it's going to take for them to turn this ship around. But the question the Titans fans have to ask themselves is, what's the most effective? What gives us the highest percentage chance to compete in a game like that? Is it draft the quarterback, hope the quarterback's better than all the other quarterbacks, hope that the quarterback is somebody who can at any point will you to a win? Because those quarterbacks do exist. There's 4 of them running around in the AFC. It's Mahomes, it's Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow.
How many of them came with the number 1 overall pick?
None.
1. Burrow.
Burrow.
So I think there's also a misconception that you only find that guy with the number 1 overall pick. Right now, the elite of the elite of the elite, Joe Burrow's the only one that was taken number 1 overall in the NFL draft. And Joe Burrow's also the only one who has overcome deficiencies up front to beat Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. But we also quickly forget how well the Bengals defense played in that AFC Championship in Kansas City, picking off Mahomes twice, including the clincher and overtime to win. Seth Walder of ESPN Research put this tweet out after the game. I was stunned at this. The Eagles blitzed Pat Mahomes on 0 of his 42 dropbacks. 0.
Yeah.
last night.
It's crazy. It's only the fourth time since they've started tracking those things on next-gen stats in any game where a defense just hasn't blitzed.
Even more stunning, Mahomes is the sixth quarterback in Super Bowl history to not be blitzed one single time. 0-6. All six quarterbacks lost in those Super Bowls. It blew my mind.
If you're not, if you're struggling without them sending additional pressure, it's not the entire battle, but it's a good percentage of it.
And we've talked about that before. The Titans were good at that a couple of years ago. It's not rocket science if you can rush with 4.
Yeah, but how fleeting was it? It didn't last very long.
Sure, 1 to 2 seasons where you felt like the Titans could get significant pressure with 4.
And I wouldn't even argue that it was 2 full seasons. It felt like 1.5.
Yeah,
where they had like a legit pass rush where we looked at that around Jeff Simmons, obviously, and said, okay, they've got juice.
Yeah,
let's see how far
Tart was in there.
Let's see how far this could take them. And then Bud Dupree was good when he was out there, but he was hardly ever out there. Harold has been a steady player, but Harold Landry's never been a game-breaking edge player for the Titans. It doesn't mean he's bad. It just means he's not Garrett or TJ Watt or any of these. Josh Sweat had a monster performance en route, by the way. He's going to be a free agent. We talk about big-ticket items in a selective free agent process. If you were going to be selective, what would you rather have? The $20 million guard on the offensive line for last night for the Chiefs? Or would you like a Josh Sweat?
Or do you just draft one?
Well, yeah, you could draft both, theoretically.
He made himself a lot of money last night.
He'd made himself a lot of money all season, but to crown your season that way en route to a championship where there's even a debate between you and the starting quarterback of a Super Bowl winning team as to who should be MVP, yeah, Josh Sweat did pretty well last night. Wayne is up next. Hello.
How you doing? I'm hanging on.
What's up?
Hey, this Wayne being objective. If Jaylen Hurts hadn't had A.J. Brown down the field, there wouldn't have been a touchdown. And who did A.J. Brown used to play for? The Titans. And if the Baltimore Ravens had not had Derrick Henry, would they have made the playoffs? I don't think so. You got a 2,000-yard running back. Come on, man. We can't just keep giving away our players and saying they're not good enough. Put a team out there and develop them. They will be good enough. I'm tired of seeing these 3-13 seasons. We got a good platform. Let's make a good team out of it.
Thanks for the call, Wayne. I appreciate it. Fair to expect there would have been a touchdown even if AJ didn't score one because they were not scoring at will, but Mahomes was turning it over so frequently, putting their Philadelphia in positions to succeed. But I get your point.
And the Ravens would have probably made the playoffs without Derrick Henry.
Disagree there.
But yes, we all
making
agree.
the playoffs just fine without Derrick before.
We all agree it was not good for the Titans to give away A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I wondered how much we were going to end up spending time on AJ specifically today. Because can you name the former Titans that won a Super Bowl
last night? Mm-hmm. AJ, Kari Blossingame,
Titans legend, Vandy legend.
Kyle Phillips, part of the Eagles practice squad.
Mm-hmm. Also, Jackson tells me that he told you Kari Blossingame that you did.
He
not
did
know
tell
that.
me Kari Blossingame this morning.
To pawn off his information,
but I don't know the fourth. Is it the assistant coach?
No, it's LaRaven Clark. Titans legend.
Wow, LaRaven Clark
Titans
is an Eagle?
Mm-hmm. He's on injured reserve. He got a ring.
I can't believe he's still around. How old is LaRaven Clark?
Brother, he played 13 games for this team.
Oh, he's only 31.
Not 2 seasons ago did that man play in 13 games for the Tennessee Titans.
He's only 31.
Titans legends all.
Wow. Forgot about that guy.
Super Bowl champions all at this point in time. Yeah, I didn't know. AJ has been a Eagle longer than he's been a Titan. So I don't know. Even as a lot of you accuse me of twisting that knife for entirely too long, even I'm at the point where I'm like, yeah, yes, it was bad. It was bad then, it's bad now. And maybe it feels worse if you're a Titans fan because you still love him and he's a fun player. And I don't know if certainly they're not competing for Super Bowls as often without him. And the Eagles were quick to capitalize on a deal that doesn't come around very often for a player that doesn't come around very often. But yeah, he was a part of an excellent team. They are an excellent team. It's not just AJ because they have one of the best offensive lines. They have one of the best defensive fronts. They've got one of the best quarterbacks, even if you don't consider him to be in the top 6 or 7. I don't know how far you'd go on a list of starting quarterbacks before you got to Jaylen Hurts. Although, to his credit, all the dude does is win. I mean, he's just a competitor. And he's one of the rare things. I mean, is football the most chaotic sport because there's so many different things going on, so many different parts and pieces that can mess up their job, that can have
argue that.
A huge consequence? How important? Think about the Titans' experience this year. Football's a chaotic game. What makes the chaos less controllable when you have a chaotic quarterback? Jaylen Hurts is as calm, as even-keeled, as steady, as stable a personality type.
Oh, yeah. Always has been, too.
And think about A.J. Brown when what are they, up 16 when he's when he starts getting a little frustrated on the sideline?
Come on.
Hey, you know what? No, I love that. I want a receiver that's like that. You need that kind of competitor if you're going to compete at the highest level. But I get it.
It only it's like you're up multiple scores in a Super Bowl. I don't know. I was like, come on, man. It only seems to happen when they're having success too.
Sure.
When they're having success, but he individually is not.
That's fine.
Seems to be the only time that AJ has complaints.
I'm totally okay with it.
I don't love that.
I'm totally okay with it.
Did he read his book?
He did read his book.
He did pull the book out.
He did read his book
Was
after
there
he
a
scored the
prop bet
touchdown.
whether or not A.J. Brown would read his book or not?
No, I don't know.
Probably.
Maybe offshore.
But Jaylen Hurts has been that way since this was a true freshman starting at quarterback for Nick Saban, which had never been done before. Yep. And you can see why. Just to hear him talk, he's just so philosophical. He just does not speak like a normal, what is he, 27, 28?
Yeah.
He's about our age, or my age. 26.
Relax.
He's 26, so he might be closer to Jackson than us.
I had people. I had people, by the way, accusing me of being one of those "Hey, fellow kids" people because I was talking about the halftime show. I'm like, Kendrick Lamar is significantly older than me. That's just it was a weird thing. We'll talk about the divide between people who enjoyed the halftime show and people who didn't enjoy the halftime show later on.
But yeah, I'm tired of talking about A.J. Brown. Like that was 2 general managers ago, right?
I'm not tired of talking about him, but I'm tired of talking about him within the Titans prison.
Right.
Like
That's
he doesn't matter here anymore. But here's what I'll say. Here's the only reason why it will continue to be.
I was going to say, is that why you made like an Instagram video about it last night? Because you're tired of talking about it?
Well, no, because I knew I'd do well.
Low hanging fruit.
I mean, hey, I would be lying if I didn't say that would do the best of all the possible reactions that I personally could have to the Super Bowl. Anyway, it will continue to be a talking point here, Lucas, only until they get out of this. Because that's such a huge moment in the domino effect that was the fallout from. So you start with the Bengals playoff game in 21, at the end of the 21 season. Then that Thursday night of the first round in 22, you trade A.J. Brown. The consequences of that, John Robinson's fired, 8 months after that?
Approximately.
At that point?
Longer. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, December of that year.
Yeah, I think it ends up being about 8 months.
Pretty much.
So then John Robinson, Rand Carthon comes in, doesn't work with Mike Vrabel. Like, it's not the reason that they're 3-14, the A.J. Brown trade. But it's a huge part of it because they're still chasing offensive playmakers.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So until the roster is restored to a place where they don't have to look at A.J. Brown, maybe you'll always look at A.J. Brown with some degree of longing, but right now you're looking at Treylon Burks still, him on the roster, on IR again, coming off most recently an ACL repair, seeing the amount of games that he's missed. AJ's only missed 5 games as an Eagle.
Yeah.
So until that, like how extreme that experience is for Titans fan, until that levels out a little bit, A.J. Brown is still a relevant talking point here.
It feels like that was the first domino. In reality, the first of the J-Rob decline. It probably started with Isaiah Wilson in that 2020 draft in general, but I get why.
That was also a pivotal moment in time. For sure.
And look, the J-Rob era was in decline no matter what, and that would have been the end result of the AJ thing no matter what. I mean, at some point, that roster was just headed into such a state of disrepair, AJ would not have been happy here. I mean, it would not have worked itself out because AJ remained, but I get why people assign the beginning of the end of J-Rob to the AJ trade, no doubt. And it was coming right off that Bengals playoff loss.
Sure. It was insult to injury, right? That's what that trade was. So there's always going to be a degree of relevance, always going to be a degree of connection, because that goes down as a pivotal moment in time with, hey, you were relevant. What happened? Oh, you did a bunch of these things that led you to irrelevancy, and now you're still trying to dig yourself out of it. Well, that guy's playing in 2 Super Bowls since he's gotten traded there and now has won 1. 615-737-1045, the number. Kevin is next.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Good.
I have a question. Do you think that Callahan's job security will have a bearing on what they do with the number 1 pick? Like, in other words, if he has time to roster build and they give him the time to go through and, draft and build and trade back in the draft, do you think they'll weigh in on which way they go? I'll hang up and listen, and y'all have a good day.
No. Here's what I think, because I understand the question, but and you'll tell me if I'm off base on this. To me, you draft the play, like we talked about this. You draft the players for the coaching staff that you have. If you have a coach that has say in personnel that can dictate more of those terms, then it becomes complicated, right? Because you do have people. I mean, he's coaching for his job, Brian Callahan, this year. Nobody's disputing this. I don't think he would say, I don't think about those things. But if you got him in an honest moment, I'm sure he would not dispute that either. He understands 3 and 14.
After 3 and 14, to some degree, that's just the state of things in the NFL. You are, to some degree, coaching for your job.
That's what it is. So I think that they have intentionally, since they ran into the issue with Mike Vrabel, that they, as a franchise, one of their new philosophical approaches is, well, we're not going to be super coach-centric here. Like, the coach matters. We want a good coach. We want a coach that we can work with. But here's our process. We're going to build the best possible roster. If this coach can't do anything with it, all right, fine. We'll find another coach that can. That's kind of the way.
I think so. 2025 will inform them inform us about the future of Brian Callahan here. But I think they are. I don't think they are looking at this as a lame duck situation, that they're waiting for him to fail to fire him at the first opportunity.
I'm just saying they're not course correcting one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going out of their way to get players just because Brian Callahan's their coach, and they're not going to not draft a player or change their draft strategy because Brian Callahan's the coach. They're going to put together, with Brian Callahan's input to some extent, the best possible roster, and then come what may.
But the overall strategy is also patience over panic, and I think that has to permeate throughout your entire organization and not just be limited to the front office and the roster. I think that has to go into the coach as well, but there is a breaking point there. We don't know what that breaking point could be, but I do think they're going to be patient with Brian Callahan. I don't think he's fired if the Titans don't make the playoffs in 2025, but there are extremes, right? How much improvement?
Context is important. Like, they can miss the playoffs. How did they get there?
Yeah, they can show improvement. They can show proof of concept. If they go 2 and 15, then it's probably hard to envision a return, especially if you don't have that promise
if they go
at
2
quarterback.
and 15, get out of town.
Yeah.
Like, that's just no.
But
I understand your point.
I do think there is a level of patience for Brian Callahan, but like anything else, it will have a breaking point.
I think there's plenty of people who are coming in here, and it's going to be hard. Like, it's going to be hard for any of us because last year was a stain on everybody's resume, and everybody who was involved in last year is going to have some kind of preconceived notions, fair or unfair, coming in about them. But it is a clean slate to an extent, specific to the quarterback. They can make their own luck here to a degree. For Brian Callahan, though, I just think that the slate is a little less clean because 3 and 14 is damning, and it makes the scrutiny on him specifically more than a lot of these other parties that are involved.
I know a quarterback that could be available in 2025.
God help us. Aaron Rodgers is expected to be released by the Jets. Should the Titans want him? We'll talk about it next. I love living in Middle Tennessee. We've got great restaurants, entertainment, sports, and one of the nation's top Ford dealers right here in our backyard. Two Rivers Ford. Remember that name. Two Rivers has been a staple in our community since 1983. They're locally owned. They have a non-commissioned sales team, and they sell below MSRP. They've been doing business with integrity for decades. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer.
Shotgun snap to Hurts, left tackle block, line drive throw, caught on the 5. A.J. Brown hits the pylon far side. Touchdown, Philadelphia. They're destroying the Chiefs.
It was a dominant performance in Super Bowl 59. It's the Eagles that are champions today. 40-22 over the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't let the score lie to you. It was never that close. That game was over at the half. You didn't know it yet, because you still believe in the voodoo and the witchcraft of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and, well, they're the Chiefs. They'll just do it, because more often than not, they do it.
That was the man, Kevin Harlan, on the Westwood One call, by the way, right here on the Zone.
Yes, we should give proper credit. I left Grace's apartment where we were watching the game. I caught a good part of the fourth quarter in the car listening to Kevin Harlan, and he's just
the greatest.
He's probably my favorite play-by-play guy. Which is funny to say because Lucas is a play-by-play person on this show.
Hurtful. No, I would never dream to ask you.
I would hope that you wouldn't take that as an insult.
Yeah, no, I definitely not.
Maybe someday, bud.
Definitely not. No,
but in the meantime,
his ability to transition from TV to radio and everything that is different about calling a game on TV versus radio, nobody does it. Nobody.
So good.
Does it as seamlessly as Kevin Harlan. But every Westwood One, best in the business.
So the question, and again, for Titans fans is, what is your feeling on the quarterback plan that your team has to put in place? Nobody's expecting you to compete for a Super Bowl in 2025, but en route to get back to games like that, how many times do you think the Titans have even played, since they've been the Titans, in a conference championship game since 25 years ago in Atlanta when they went to the Super Bowl?
How many times the Titans have played in the conference championship?
Yeah.
Twice, right?
Twice.
Yeah.
It's such an easy thing to do or say what the Eagles and Chiefs have been able to do, which is, these are good lessons for us to learn, and we'll take another crack at it next year or something like that. It's very rare to get back to these kind of games with the same core of players. The Chiefs, the Patriots, the Eagles here of late, since 2018, since they started really competing at a high level again. They've made it seem a bit routine, but it's not. And I watched ESPN's piece with Kevin Dyson, our friend and colleague, where they give him an iPad. He's watching, 1 yard short again. He says, and I didn't realize this, he couldn't watch the play for 13 years. Mm-hmm. I hadn't heard him say that before. I'm sure he has talked about that in moments, but I'm sure that, that Titans team went 13-3 the following year in 2000 and came up short.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do. So the question that becomes is, what's your quarterback plan en route to getting back to games like that?
What's cool, by the way, real quick about that, the 1 yard short tackle, is the fact that Mike Jones, the linebacker that made that tackle on Dice, and Kevin Dyson became pretty good friends after that.
Yeah.
Talk about that play a lot.
So, all that to say, quarterback plan is a huge part of this. It's the most important part of this. Nobody would dispute otherwise, even if it's not the most sure route to winning a championship. You saw the better team win last night. The better quarterback was on the Eagles team last night. Patrick Mahomes did not outplay, by any stretch of the imagination, Jaylen Hurts. But we know in their careers, Patrick Mahomes has been the better player. Just didn't happen to be the case last night. Aaron Rodgers is expected to get released by the Jets. Shocking to no one. So, how the Jets era of now 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers is going to be remembered, probably not very fondly. There will be teams that will be interested in Aaron Rodgers at an advanced age, 2 years now removed from the Achilles. The question is it worth it here? I don't think he's going to be super expensive relative to, what his peers at the position are going to make. Not that he would be super cost effective, but he's not going to be he's not going to get what Darnold's about to make, which apparently from the Raiders. That's being talked about.
The Raiders are interested in Sam Darnold?
Very heavily.
That's where Pete Carroll is. That's where he's got his eyes.
Well, it seems that was the reporting, at least from a lot of the Super Bowl pregame shows on NFL Network and ESPN.
And you had Kevin O'Connell on the red carpet before NFL Honors talking about him with Diana Rossini, saying, hopefully he's a Viking in 2025. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what all happens with Sam Darnold, who, again, just led the Vikings to their best regular season since the late 90s. So keeping that in mind, even though things did collapse a little bit at the end, people brought this up. People were bringing up Aaron Rodgers last week a good bit when you were gone. We got 2 or 3 calls about Rodgers in the 2 days you were gone. And now it feels more real than ever. But I said there's a very real situation where that is the best option in terms of talent, experience, cost. There is a scenario where you go from Aaron Rodgers to Russell Wilson, where you go from Aaron Rodgers to who else is out there when you look at the free agents available in the quarterback market?
Darnold, it's Flacco.
Those are the type of Joe Flacco, Mac Jones.
Yep.
There is a very real situation where that is by far your best option, just from a football perspective.
So who are the teams that need quarterbacks or are in flux right now? Steelers for sure. It sounds like they're going to bring back one or the other between Fields and Wilson. We'll see what they actually end up doing. But right now it's the Steelers. They're in flux. Minnesota could start J.J. McCarthy next year, but there's reason to believe that they might still be in the Sam Darnold game, and that would have a domino effect on the rest of the market. So we'll say Minnesota for now. And could Aaron Rodgers go to Minnesota? I don't know. That could be a short-term solution. Depends on how they feel about J.J. McCarthy. There's obviously the Titans, who have, this black hole at the position, respectfully, to Will Levis, who is the only quarterback under contract, but you understand that you can go about addressing the quarterback situation here in a variety of different ways, and it's going to be addressed in a variety of different ways in this upcoming offseason, and should not preclude you from completely removing yourself from any of these players on the market. There's the Raiders, who we just talked about potentially for Darnold.
Chip Kelly.
Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have worked together before, so that's a potential move to keep an eye on there. I have no idea if Pete Carroll would be interested in working with Russ or vice versa again, but it's a connection that's easy to draw. And
how much of a say does Chip Kelly have in that would be my question.
Who has more? Well, my question would be to answer your question with a question. Who has more say in the quarterback? Is it Chip Kelly or Tom Brady?
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting figures there. A lot of interesting layers to that Raider situation.
Now, of the openings that we just talked, and there's obviously the Jets, who are not going to be back in the Aaron Rodgers business, or not expected to be back in the Aaron Rodgers business. Right now, he's still under contract with the Jets. So, of all the different landing spots, if I was Rodgers, obviously Minnesota has the greatest appeal. Minnesota is the most competitive out of that group. In the conference that's easier to win in than the AFC. You could go to Pittsburgh, but you'd still be seeing Cincinnati twice, Baltimore twice. We'll see what happens with Cleveland. If I'm Rodgers, Minnesota would be the preferred landing spot. But again, there's more that has to happen there for Minnesota to be viable. Tennessee, it's a conversation between the Raiders and the Titans. Who's the least competitive landing spot? Who has less on the roster? Right now, I'd argue that the Raiders have more on the roster than the Titans do.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is still under contract. What am I saying? Devontae Adams was a Jet.
No. It's to me about Max Crosby, who we'll see. I don't know what Max Crosby, if he's going to end up being there in 2025 or not. But I don't think there's a player on the Titans roster that's as good at what they do as Max Crosby is at what he does. And then, I'm a terrible job by me. I'm blanking on the Georgia tight end.
Brock Bowers.
Bowers.
I can't believe I just brain farted into saying Devontae Adams was still a Raider.
Is there a skill player on the Titans that's as good as Brock Bowers? Looks like he might be. It's just 1 year, but he was excellent.
No, yeah. I mean, broke the rookie record for receiving yards by a tight end in a rookie year. I mean, he had nearly 1,200 receiving yards as a rookie. Jacoby Myers quietly had a 1,000-yard season for the Raiders. I didn't realize that last year. But, yeah, you're talking about Alexander Mattinson at running back. Amir Abdullah is still there. Zamir White.
Christian Wilkins, I forgot, is a Raider.
But, yeah, I think slide edge to the Raiders there because you have a bona fide star, it seems, one on each side of the ball. So and Crosby and Bowers.
I don't, again, that may come down to personal preference for both the organization and the player. Like Rodgers obviously has to agree to sign a contract with his next team, should the Jets release him outright. I mean, it doesn't sound like they wouldn't be able to trade Aaron Rodgers. Maybe they could. I don't know. But not the current deal it's not something I think teams are going to want to take on. So it's between Vegas and Tennessee as the most viable talking points for places he could go.
Where does he own land?
Tennessee. And he's, publicly praised the good people of Tennessee. He's also publicly praised the no state income tax. Don't know if that's the case in Nevada off the top of my head, but I know it's a thing here, and it's very real, the appeal, especially for a player at the end, where you got a few more cracks at one of these significant paydays. Let's try and make as much money as possible on the way out the door.
What are his priorities, right? Because you're talking about two rebuilds there in Vegas and Tennessee. And nobody knows. It's a huge wild card.
So I watched a little bit. Maybe we talk about this later in the week because there's a lot more there with Aaron Rodgers that we could kind of drill down on. But coming up next, speaking of quarterbacks, was that the worst game of Patrick Mahomes' career? There's some numbers that indicate so. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11:01. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl 59 champions. 40-22, the final in New Orleans over the Kansas City Chiefs. Vic Fangio's defense stifled Kansas City, turning them over 3 times, including a pick 6 by rookie defensive back Cooper DeJean. Jaylen Hurts winning Super Bowl MVP, going 17 of 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception, plus 72 yards on the ground and a score. In other NFL news, Adam Schefter reported on Sunday the New York Jets are expected to part ways with quarterback Aaron Rodgers, with a formal announcement expected in the coming days. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
So the Eagles dominate in Super Bowl 59. That's the story today. People have been preying on the Kansas City Chiefs' downfall. They got it last night. 40-22, the final. But, you know, if you watch that game or if you watch the parts of the game that mattered, because it wasn't a good football game, but it was an excellent individual performance or excellent team performance by the Eagles last night. Not nearly as close as the 18 points would indicate that it was. Late, I would call them garbage time touchdowns by Kansas City. Helped them draw it a little closer, but it was not close pretty much from the jump.
Was it a bigger blowout before those garbage time touchdowns? Was it a more dominant performance than Seahawks over Broncos?
Oh, man, I don't know. Wasn't
11 years ago?
Peyton's first offensive snap a safety?
Yeah. No, that was straight up domination
it was,
from beginning to end. So you'd probably have to lean towards that one. 43-8, I think was that final. But
I don't think I've seen a game as lopsided as that Broncos-Seahawks Super Bowl. That was the worst Super Bowl I've ever seen. Last night's was not a good game, but an excellent performance for the Eagles. For Patrick Mahomes, who we typically associate with excellence, very much not a good performance. It's rare enough that you get a variety of different things that happen. One, Mahomes, objectively bad in that game. Was not able to problem solve. Lucas, in terms of his performance and like historical references for even, let's just take it first half. First half performances, one of the closest comparisons that you can find is the Sam Darnold seeing ghosts game. That was something that I saw Robert Mays of The Athletic point out on Twitter yesterday.
I saw that.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah, a lot of the metrics from Mahomes in the first half put him in a category with some of the worst performances we can remember by a quarterback in recent years. What he tweeted was, per Next Gen Stats, Pat Mahomes averaged negative 1.36 EPA per dropback in the first half. It is the 10th worst mark in a first half for any game since 2018. The rest of the list includes that Darnold seeing ghost game, 2 Davis Mills games, and starts from P.J. Walker and Will Greer.
Yeah, because somebody in the F&M Bank chat where you can interact with the show, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also call us, 615-737-1045. Dixie, your old pal, on YouTube, says...
Don't appreciate that Dixie took away the last name from the F&M Bank chat after getting me with it.
Oh, I'm so sorry that one thing is not slighted in your favor on this radio show for 3 hours a day. I deeply apologize.
Really? You had to retire the last name after you got me to say it on the air?
Yeah, I think that was appropriate. This is a one-time bit. Dixie.
Great bit, though.
Yeah, excellent bit. I still have it saved on my phone for when I need it. He says, it was like watching Will Levis to watch Patrick Mahomes last night. What Lucas just read you is, no, it's worse. Worse. Yes, the turnovers were a problem for Will Levis, but the situational turnovers for Pat last night, especially the one at the end of the first half, where, all right, just something, some semblance of momentum, and then to have that happen for the Eagles to capitalize yet again, brutal. Not, as we brought this up earlier, only the fourth time since Next Gen Stats started keeping track of advanced metrics in games has a defense not blitzed. And this happened in the Super Bowl. They were pressuring Mahomes to the tune of, I think it was 16 total pressures that they got on Pat and 6 sacks, which is the most he's ever taken in his career.
Yeah.
The most he's ever taken in his career. It was an utterly dominant performance. And it's not just like, because there were some moments like, so let's just take the weird incompletion to DeAndre Hopkins. It was a classic Mahomes play. He's under duress. He's on the move. He lets a ball go. It's not the perfect pass. It's not the best pass you've ever seen, but it's good enough that a receiver could make a play on the ball. Hopkins just doesn't make a play on the ball in that spot, and it kills a drive that's critical for them to try and keep things close at that point of the game, at that point in the first half. There were miscues between Mahomes and Travis Kelce, which even if, I know he's not moving the same as Travis Kelce as we associate Travis Kelce to be, it's been a lot of years for him, a lot of postseason football, certainly a lot of long NFL seasons. So he wasn't dynamic last night, but even then there was miscues between those two, and that hardly ever happens. So in comparison, it's the worst game, given the stakes. Again, the Super Bowl, the final game for the opportunity to make history that no other NFL team has made, 3 consecutive Super Bowl victories. It's the worst game of his career.
Yeah, with the context and chasing history, for sure. It did remind me of the game against the Titans in 2021.
Well, that's something that's an interesting comparison, because that's the counter to my argument of, which we'll talk about later.
The numbers were worse. The numbers were worse for Mahomes in that game, the 27-3 loss against the Titans, than the Super Bowl last night.
That by QBR is his worst performance.
QBR, I mean, whatever other metric, he took less sacks, 4, like you said, 6. That's never happened to him in his career. He had 2 turnovers in that game. He turned it over 3 times last night. No touchdowns. And, they had a couple garbage time touchdowns late last night. But, yeah, in that game in 2021, Pat Mahomes in the 27-3 loss by the Chiefs to the Titans, 20 of 35, 206 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, a fumble, and 4 sacks taken.
Jaylen Hurts, the opposing quarterback, the Super Bowl MVP after last night's Eagles' dominance, spoke about the job that his defense did.
It definitely took a team effort, took a group effort, and only thing I can think about is all the effort, all the work that was put in over the course of time. And I think we had a focused group out there. Offense was able to score points, to take advantage of opportunities, just enough to put points on the board, and then defense played their ass off. They played how they played all year, and I truly believe offense wins games, but defense wins championships, and how that defense has been able to play. It's a great testament to them. Like I said, it's only the beginning until it's the end, and the end ain't coming anytime soon.
I mean, you think about the way that the Eagles won it in 18. And I know the quarterback was different, but they were overwhelming as a pass rush group. And over the course of time, that group had gotten depleted. Fletcher Cox, for example, aged out. You had a couple of years where they went from the league-leading sack defense to dropping off. The year that they traded for Kevin Byard, obviously 2 years ago, I guess, 2 seasons ago, at this point in time, with the 2024 season now having concluded. And they retooled their defense. They got a bunch of extra juice up front. Turns out drafting Georgia players is a successful formula.
Yeah, and they did this without Nakobe Dean, who was injured.
Sure, but they did it with Nolan Smith, and they did it with Jalen Carter, and they did it with Jordan Davis.
But think about just this draft alone. Like, they went out and they brought in Zach Bond and Oren Burks, and those guys helped them win. But this 2024 draft, this rookie class alone for the Eagles, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, who shut down Xavier Worthy last night, Jalix Hunt, who had a sack last night, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who's played some good snaps for them this season. Those 4 players alone, all from this rookie class, all with significant impact. Hunt, Mitchell, and DeJean, 3 of the 4 with significant impact last night alone on their way to winning this game. That is where the turnaround happened. Because when you look at the core of the Chiefs roster that beat the Eagles 2 years ago, there's a lot of A lot of carryover from that football team. The Eagles got younger, got more athletic up front, and it paid off. Every loss that you look at with Pat Mahomes in the playoffs, Eagles last night, losing to Burrow and the Bengals, losing to Brady and the Bucks, and let's throw in that 2021 regular season loss to the Titans. All of them, Mahomes sacked 3 or more times and committed 2 or more turnovers. So there's the blueprint. The Eagles just played it out as masterfully as anybody.
They did. They played as good a game. I mean, beyond the Legion of Boom Peyton Manning game, I don't know that I've ever seen a defensive performance as complete as the one that the Eagles put out last night. Patrick Simpson, at Patrick_Simpson, had a tweet this morning that, it's not just the A.J. Brown situation that finds the Titans in the spot that they're in. Georgia has been on a crazy run, he tweets, of putting out NFL talent, and somehow the Titans got Isaiah Wilson and Monty Rice.
Yeah, that's pretty sobering.
That's a tough one. 615-737-1045 is how you chime in. Ronnie is up next. Hey, Ronnie.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good.
Listen, I want to comment on quarterbacks. Do you not see Shadir as being a problem like Aaron? I mean, if Dion gets a head coaching job...
A problem like who? I'm sorry, you cut out.
I said like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Shadir, if his dad gets a coaching job, he's going to want to be traded. Or he's going to demand that the coach at the Titans be fired and his dad hired, and then they're going to want certain players. And you get the same thing with Aaron, not showing up to training camp and, getting his coach fired and demanding certain wide receivers, I don't think we want that in Nashville. I just... Do we not see that as being a huge problem?
No, not even remotely. Those situations are not even remotely comparable, Ronnie. I appreciate the call, but you got a lot of things wrong there. One, Aaron Rodgers did not show up for training camp. He missed the he missed the mandatory mini camp with that trip to Egypt. Not quite training camp. You can argue. I see his point. He also didn't get Robert Saleh fired. The reporting on it, at the very least, is that he advocated.
Well, Rodgers has unquestionably been an issue off the field, but he had a legendary career before that.
Ronnie just assumed or just said that are incorrect, which is what I'm addressing first before I talk about the comparison that he just made. He did not get Robert Saleh fired. At least he is not reported to have advocated for the firing of Robert Saleh. And there is a significant difference between a young player that has never appeared in the NFL, has not won anything in the NFL, and a 40-year-old one-time Super Bowl champion that has been allowed to do things his kind of way for an extended period of time, has become set in his ways, and now is probably going to be harder to course correct. Also, Shedeur is not any kind of a problem child ever. There's
never been any evidence of that.
Because people, and he's not even the louder of the two quarterbacks. Like, have you seen any of the
Cam Ward is definitely more of the in-your-face.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, for sure.
Shedeur is incredibly polished because he's been around this stuff, but that's like, what's the association? What Dion has not done other than have an outsized personality, which people may find objectionable. I would want, if I was a professional athlete getting ready to go through the draft process, I would thank the football gods above if I had a figure like Deion Sanders to, one, shepherd me through that process, and two, influence that process to potentially put me in the best possible position to succeed.
Well, Deion, you're right, is one of the most outsized personalities of our sports lifetimes, especially when he was a player. He always backed it up. He always had the talent to back it up, and anybody wanted him on their team. The lazy association, I think, that is being made with Shedeur Sanders is that because he is Deion's son, he also is going to have that outsized personality without the talent or skill level to back it up. And there is no evidence of that whatsoever. You're right. Cam Ward is the more loud and in-your-face kind of prospect in a way that I think will endear him to teams. I think he holds guys accountable, right?
I think he's a dog.
I think
players
they're both
follow highly competitive.
Absolutely. I think both guys are going to crush the interview process. I don't know how they're going to do when they're tested in terms of the X's and O's side of things. But just from a job interview perspective of, do I want this person in my organization? Just the person, the character. I think both Sanders and Ward are going to crush that part of the pre-draft process. Yeah, it's a lazy association to make. By the way, if you get half the career that Aaron Rodgers had, then I think you're good. I think you landed a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, no kidding. That's yeah. I get the potential protest to Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career, but Aaron Rodgers was one of the most viable things that you could have acquired when he became available via trade, and it just so happens that the Titans were not in the business of Aaron Rodgers at the time. It's not. That comparison is going to come up more and more often, but it's not one that has any basis in fact or reality. 615-737-1045 is the number. There was a report on the Titans and at least the latest rumblings on what they may do with the number 1 overall draft pick and a potential domino effect that could have across the league. We'll talk about it next. Don't trust your health to an online pharmacy. And don't feel like you're out of options if you're somebody who's dealt with ED and the pills have stopped working. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help you. They want you to understand every option and every treatment protocol that they have available for ED. The Tennessee Men's Clinic protocols are patient-centered and customized to your needs. They have treatments for everything from low testosterone, ED, treatments that increase size and stamina, and everything else in between. The bottom line is no one has more expertise and experience in successfully treating men's sexual health issues than the Tennessee Men's Clinic, and they're passionate about what they do. So don't give up hope. Don't get frustrated. Don't be ashamed of getting the help that you may need to continue to have that kind of performance. Schedule an appointment online today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for their Franklin or Midtown location, or call them 615-208-9090.
From the Kansas City 46, Eagles take over 1st and 10. The shotgun snap, the fake handoff. And Hurts drops back 5, winds up, long arching pass. Down the middle, it's caught over the shoulder in the end zone. Touchdown, Smith. And that may make it insurmountable.
Welcome back to the show. How dare you sully a Kevin Harlan call?
Yeah, come on.
With that foolishness.
Why you got to make me look terrible, put me in anything with Kevin Harlan? That's funny.
Which I thoroughly enjoy, except it threw me off. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. The Eagles are Super Bowl champions yet again. Second time in franchise history. The Titans are not. They are this year's team that is picking first overall, whether they were worse than the Cleveland Browns, who own the same record as the Tennessee Titans. I suppose that could be debated. But either way, two teams at the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, the number one overall pick presents you many opportunities to change your fortunes and try and build towards what the Chiefs and Eagles were competing for yesterday. Not saying it's going to happen right away. Not saying you should have any level of expectation. Not saying that you should trust them to get it right, because there's no reason to at this point in time. But as they try and pull themselves out of this mess that they've been kind of spiraling towards for the past 3 seasons, as a report comes out on Saturday night about the thing that we all know, which is the Titans open to potentially trading the number one overall pick and are expected to receive calls. Now, this is something that Mike Borgonzi said in his introductory press conference. He said that on the heels of some people in the league congratulating him, he was also asked, people probing on the number one overall pick. By the way, those conversations happen every day. Every day in the lead up until such time as an actual transaction comes down. Like, there are people texting, there are people calling, there are people inquiring about, hey, what about this? Just as on the opposite end, Mike Borgonzi is calling teams about players that may never, ever be feasible for the Titans to acquire, or, might be in the Myles Garrett realm of possibility, available but not really viable for a team that needs draft picks, because that's your job. Your job is to call around, do regular diligence on players across the league, and whether you're making those phone calls each and every day or somebody on your staff is making those phone calls each and every day, it's a constant process of, hey, what if I gave you this for that? So we know that the Titans are open for business and that there are plenty of good reasons to potentially trade the number one overall pick if they get the right offer. But this is what Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network adds to the thing that we already know. The Titans, trying to reboot, are deciding what they want to do. Early in the process, Titans are open-minded at this point in time. All options on the table, including possibly trading the pick, and the Titans are expected to receive calls from other teams. This we know. The last time, Rappaport adds, the number one pick was traded was in 2023 when the Chicago Bears dealt the top selection to the Carolina Panthers, who then selected quarterback Bryce Young in an exchange for 4 draft picks, including 2 firsts and veteran wide receiver DJ Moore. If Tennessee does explore trade talks, which the Bears never did last year before they selected USC quarterback Caleb Williams, it will have dramatic ramifications. According to most high-level evaluators, and again, I'm just reading directly from NFL.com, Miami's Cam Ward and Colorado's Shedeur Sanders are the 2 quarterbacks who would be in consideration for the number one overall pick. After that, there are questions. Plenty of talent, but questions. In other words, fit has never been more important, is what Rappaport is quoting Daniel Jeremiah as saying, who's, of course, the foremost draft expert for the NFL Network at this point in time. You've got Cleveland at 2, who obviously needs a quarterback, given the Deshaun Watson mess.
Yeah, fit has never been more important in regards to the quarterback position, right? Because neither are overwhelming.
You're not drafting either of these players and saying, yeah, regardless of fit, they can make it happen.
Yeah.
These players are going to have, and, that's the case for most players. Like Trevor Lawrence was thought to be a player that could overcome, schematic fit situations. And that has not proven to be the case. And there's a variety of different reasons why Trevor Lawrence has struggled or underwhelmed. But it's not turnkey. It never is. This year feels like there's an additional emphasis on that.
It's rare. I don't think I've heard general managers, front office executives setting these marks, like 30 draft picks in 3 years, what is it, 12 top 100 picks in 3 years, I believe is another goal that they've set.
They wanted 12 top 100 picks in the next 3 years, ideally. Obviously, that's hard to accomplish.
It's a goal. Yeah.
But they
currently have 2 for 2025.
But it's not unthinkable because, again, this is a part of the John Robinson indictment. John had 11 top 100 picks in those last 3 drafts, and Roger McCreary is the only thing to come of it.
Mike Borgonzi was asked about the difficulty level during his introductory press conference of achieving those marks, 3 and 30, 12, or 30 and 3, 12 and 3. This was Borgonzi.
It's certainly possible, to do that. Like I said, we just have to have discipline in the draft as we're going through the process. Draft picks are our biggest form of currency. So when there's opportunities to trade back to collect more picks, we're going to do that. So that's always the goal, to try to get as many picks in the top 100 as you can.
So the opportunity is there. We're going to do that. That stuck out to me. Every morsel of sound we have heard from Brinker and or Borgonzi has pointed to wanting to trade out of the number 1 overall pick.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think they've been shy about that. I mean, again, you just really have to, there's not even really that much parsing that you have to do. Borgonzi's saying at the Senior Bowl, we're prioritizing building through the trenches. You know how the Eagles just won a Super Bowl? Because they were better on the offensive line and the defensive line than the Chiefs were in that particular game.
And I think maybe one of the responses would be, well, don't you want to sell at least a little bit that you like one of these quarterbacks to provide some incentive for somebody to trade up, for the Giants or the Browns to trade up? But I don't think that's necessarily the case. Somebody's going to fall in love with one of these quarterbacks. It happens every single year, with the exception of the Pickett, Malik Willis year in 2022. Happens every year, and we have the Giants owner on record saying, I am out of patience. So that, to me, was a showing of the hands right there. John Mara saying, it's running pretty thin with a coach and a GM that he is retaining that have no answer whatsoever at the quarterback position.
At that point, you should just fire him. Like, if that's the vibe that you're going into a season with,
which we talked about that last week. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's because John Mara maybe thinks, you know what, I've been too quick on the trigger in the last few years. I'm gonna let it play out for once.
They really haven't been, though.
That's what I'm saying.
Who is Shermer got a decent amount of time.
Who has objected to any of those? Is anybody saying the Giants are regretting the day they fired Ben McAdoo? They really let go of Joe Judge too early.
What a moment in time.
So it is.
They're just bad at this. It would be.
Yeah.
And I don't think, Dayball's a coach of the year. He's been better than the other options, but the Joe Shane thing, especially, I don't know, Saquon didn't have a dominant performance last night. He had 25 carries for 57 yards. It was
still broke Terrell Davis's record.
Yeah. So it's the most rushing yards, regular season and postseason in a single season.
Yeah, he needed 30 to break the record.
Yeah, so he gets his 57, and he converts a couple of critical first downs or third downs in that game for first downs, and he does just what they needed to do. Ironically enough, Greg was right. Cosell, man, he kind of called this. He certainly didn't have the Chiefs being a non-factor on offense the way that they were, and there was no reason to believe that they would be in that particular game. Eagles have a good defense, but still, Greg was on the schematic approach to this game in the lead up on the podcast. And speaking of Greg, we've got a very exciting announcement with Greg coming up on Wednesday that we'll look forward to telling you more about. To your point, though, about the Titans and the trading back. So there's nothing like the Rappaport thing on NFL.com is not for us, because not for us locally, because we knew these things. We've talked about them. We've asked the necessary parties about them. We've been at the press conferences where they've talked about this. Is old news, but it's for the rest of the NFL saying, hey, Titans are open for business. If you didn't catch that press conference a week ago or a month ago, whatever it was. And there's a bunch of teams that are be interested. Speaking of the Giants and the waning patience of Giants ownership, Saquon Barkley wins a Super Bowl. That is something that John Mara is on record on Hard Knocks saying, I really lose sleep at night if this goes the wrong way, prior to letting Saquon walk, and then he ends up going to the Eagles, and Giants ownership's worst nightmare, Joe Shane's worst nightmare, even though he's keeping his job. If you're Joe Shane, this is the thing that gets curious, right? Because we had a caller ask earlier about the draft strategy and how much Brian Callahan coaching for his job might impact it. It's different when you got an executive who's pressing for job security has the 3rd overall pick, but both quarterbacks could be gone, and you say, "Oh, okay, let's do this," whether or not it's the right decision.
We just saw an example of this in New York with Joe Douglas. What he gave up for Devontae Adams.
Correct.
I understood it because if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm saying, what are the odds I'm still going to be here? Might as well take a crack at this. So, yeah.
New York. So if you're the Giants, let's just walk through this. Let's walk through this hypothetical. Because this is the ideal scenario for at least the Titans. I don't think it's the ideal scenario for both teams. But there is some benefit for both sides here. We know that both teams need a quarterback. We don't know how highly either front office has these quarterbacks graded or will have these quarterbacks graded on their draft board come the end of April. What you could get out of this is, a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. And if they were taking a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, fair to expect they wholeheartedly believe in that quarterback, and everything that they do after the fact will be in service of that number 1 overall pick at quarterback, which is not the worst thing in the world. If they're confident, okay, maybe you're not all in on Titans' decision-making of late, but these are new people with a new process. See if it works. If, in a different hypothetical, those quarterbacks are not graded out as number 1 overall pick worthy on the Titans board, but the Giants are in desperation mode, have them graded high enough, either one of them, whichever one they feel more compelled to jump the Browns for. If the Giants have them graded high enough and are also in desperation mode, also thinking in this hypothetical world, okay, a quarterback buys me more time. Quarterback at least gives me a little juice. Quarterback is going to satiate ownership for a period of time, and maybe they'll also work out. Then New York could call Tennessee. Tennessee would only have to slide back to 3. You could still get, in that scenario, a haul of picks and one of the best players in the draft. I'm thinking Abdul Carter. And satisfy that, or start to begin the process of acquiring the stated amount of picks over the course of the next 3 years, and specifically the number of top 100 picks over the course of the next 3 years.
So check a couple of boxes.
That's the ideal situation. Because it doesn't guarantee if the Giants jump the Browns to take the best quarterback, Cleveland could decide, okay, Travis Hunter, okay, Abdul Carter. And we don't have Shedeur graded out that highly, not highly enough to spend the 2nd overall pick on, even though everybody in the world knows we need a quarterback. And there's still a scenario where Tennessee could get a quarterback without having to draft them number 1 overall. It's there, as Coach Mack brings up all the time, there's the draft and there's the quarterback draft. Titans have the most amount of leverage because they begin the draft. How they maximize this leverage is going to be a critical part of the evaluation process for us and for you as to what this new front office is capable of relative to executing their stated goals.
And what about, we talk so much about the pressure and the limited timeline that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are on in New York, but what about Andrew Berry in Cleveland? I don't know. Jimmy Haslam,
both of them back.
They did, but I don't know how close Jimmy Haslam is to being on the end of his rope on that timeline. But Andrew Berry's been the GM in Cleveland for the last 5 years now. He's got the biggest star on his roster saying he wants out, basically campaigning. The entirety of the week at Super Bowl Radio Row, I want out of Cleveland. It feels like Myles Garrett.
It was crazy to see a player that actively agitating in front of microphones to get out.
We played a lot of the audio last week.
Did you?
He sounded hopeful. Like there was hope in his voice about landing with a contender. It is so clear he sat down with the Browns, laid that out for them, did not like their answer, and had to take it public, had to put the pressure on them publicly. I don't know how that's going to end, but we don't know what kind of pressure Andrew Berry is feeling right now to address the quarterback position after how disastrous, talk about domino effects, what the Deshaun Watson trade cost them, multiple first-round picks, a couple of seasons.
It is
the money
to me,
and potentially Myles Garrett.
The worst NFL trade in history. In certainly my lifetime of caring about or talking about or paying attention to professional football. I know there are trades. I know the Herschel Walker trade gets brought up a good deal of the time. This is the worst trade that I have ever seen.
So if you framed that for us, when the Deshaun Watson deal happened and you told us, hey, fast forward a couple years, this is going to crater miserably. He's going to have an Achilles injury. We'll have never played any good football for the Browns. They're going to bottom out with the number 2 pick. With that cap hit still to come for the coming years, they will have wasted multiple first-round picks. They will have wasted Nick Chubb's prime, and they will have wasted Myles Garrett, who now wants out of Cleveland. You'd be like, well, all right, see ya, Andrew Berry. Wonder where he's going to land next. So we don't talk enough about the pressure Andrew Berry might be under. I don't know what Jimmy Haslam is thinking. I'm not in his head. But that's a factor here, sitting there at the number 2 overall pick. You could be in a really advantageous situation with the scenarios the Browns and Giants are currently in the midst of at 2 and 3.
Again, I'm not armed with all of the information that they are armed with if I'm the Tennessee Titans front office. But if it was me, they don't need to publicly leverage any more than these two teams that could potentially be their most viable trading partners, because there's nothing to say that Cleveland couldn't go up from 2 to 1 if they felt that New York was going to try and leapfrog them for the quarterback situation, because they're not a great roster by any stretch of the imagination still, but they're a good enough roster to probably that would field a competitive team in a highly competitive division in the AFC North. If they hit on the right quarterback, if they truly believe in that quarterback. Tennessee's ideal scenario is to hold on to the number 1 overall pick for the time being, play it out as close to the draft as you're comfortable, allow the Giants and the Browns to become more uncomfortable with, what are we going to do here? What is Cleveland going to do? What is New York going to do? What's going to happen here? Who's going to try to leapfrog who? Who really wants one of these quarterbacks? What's fake and what's real? You make them sweat it out as much as you're comfortable making them sweat it out to try and leverage the best offer, and you take the best offer available to trade out. That's the best possible scenario here. Because again, what last night taught you to some extent is something that we're going to get into throughout the course of the show. How replicable it is a different conversation, but there's some important lessons to be learned about team building versus having the best individual player in a really team-centric game. Coming up next, we are going to continue to talk about the Super Bowl, the list of people with Nashville connections that just won the Super Bowl, before we pivot into the biggest lessons that particular game taught us. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles! Let's go, Birds!
Did you see it happen again? On the Fox pregame broadcast.
Someone different?
They're in New Orleans. I don't know if they're on Bourbon Street or around Bourbon Street, the Fox pregame show. Terry Bradshaw has a microphone. I think it was Terry Bradshaw had a microphone in front of an Eagles fan's face. He spelled it wrong again.
Maybe it's
they go to Michael Strahan, who's in a different location, and Michael Strahan, former New York Giant, can't wait to say, we got to work on the spelling with you Eagles fans.
What, was it spelled in the same way?
No.
It wasn't Elgsis?
It wasn't Elgsis. I think he, left
I see it. It
left out the A, or he did something.
He said E-A-G-E-L, Eagles.
Jesus.
Eagle.
You know
I
what?
hope that clip never dies.
But
The
if I'm
mayor
a
of
Philadelphia fan in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, it's one thing to be the sober mayor of Philadelphia. The guy on Bourbon Street is excused. I'm assuming that person has been drunk for days. Not just that day, but for potentially weeks.
He's got his beads on. He's in the middle.
Tough spot.
No, for the mayor of Philadelphia
botched it. Pretty tough. Pretty tough. Somebody in the comments, did you watch Abbott Elementary, the TV show?
I watched the mashup episode they did with Always Sunny. That's the only Abbott Elementary I've
another
seen.
one now that Philadelphia has won another Super Bowl. That would be great programming.
The gang got invincible.
Curtis in the chat says, ready for an Abbott Elementary segment on the mayor of Philadelphia. Either way, Philly wins the Super Bowl. Now, we mentioned somebody asked if that was Lucas trying to spell Eagles in New Orleans. Yeah.
I'm going home to Birmingham this weekend to see my parents, and I am going to show my proof of winning my 8th grade spelling bee. That yearbook's got to be lying around somewhere.
That's fine. You've since developed a disorder that makes you struggle with your spelling.
It will quell all the haters.
Nobody believes that. And even then, the haters will find you. At least in my experience, they're out there. Philadelphia Eagles, who won the Super Bowl with Titans connections last night. We mentioned them. Obviously, A.J. Brown. LaRaven Clark was here for a season, played in 13 games. Kyle Phillips was here, played in 13 games as a former 5th-round draft pick. Kari Blasingame played in like 32 games across 3 seasons. Maybe not a starter necessarily in credit, because I don't know how often the Titans were running out there with a fullback in their first offensive play, which technically makes you a starter for a game. But Kari Blasingame spent, a couple good years here, was a part of some good teams. Won the Super Bowl yesterday. A couple of practice squad players. Kari Blasingame looked like he was active for that game last night, though, it looked like. You've got some people with Nashville connections beyond the Titans that won the Super Bowl yesterday. You've got Oren Burks, a couple of Andy teammates in Kari Blasingame and Oren Burks winning the Super Bowl together.
Shout out Reed Blankenship. MTSU.
Reed Blankenship. Jimmy Wyatt got a really good picture of Reed Blankenship with a cigar in his mouth and the champagne goggles on the top of his head as the locker room celebration went on. Jimmy also tried to interview A.J. Brown in the locker room. It was an ill-fated exercise because you couldn't hear anything, but Jimmy did his job.
Longtime former Titans D-line coach Jim Washburn did not know he had a role with the Eagles.
Well, he doesn't. His son does.
Okay, that makes sense. So his son is on staff in
I
Philly.
think his son is either the outside linebackers coach or the linebackers coach.
All right.
So, yeah, there's Nashville connections in the Super Bowl all over the place. Obviously, Hopkins playing in the Super Bowl, coming up short, having a critical drop, catching a late touchdown after the game was already out of hand. Disappointing result for D-Hop. I'd be curious to see what he does as a potential, as a pending free agent. Whether he's going to want to continue to play or if that was, his last best effort.
So the Titans basically won the Super Bowl last night, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Titans got back in. There was a Titan up in the Super Bowl for the first time in 25 years. That's Samuel L. Jackson in the middle of the halftime performance. By the way, it just makes me laugh, the level of two Americas that the halftime performance is receiving, not just on the internet, but in our own F&M Bank chat, where people are just trying to agitate on behalf of not liking the halftime performance, even though we haven't talked about it yet.
Why does it have to be either the best halftime performance ever or the worst? There's never, ever an in-between. Nobody's ever just like, it was fine.
I don't want to talk about it yet. Where there's too much actual football to waste time on people's nonsense about the halftime show. But as far as last night's game goes, Legacy for Jaylen Hurts. Jaylen Hurts becomes a Super Bowl champion. He becomes a Super Bowl MVP. That's a very select group of people that's ever done that. Select group of quarterbacks that's ever done that. He is immediately elevated to, okay, the conversation of, and you'll tell me if I'm off base about this, but to me, for the success that the Eagles have had with Jaylen Hurts on the roster, you can start to have, all right, Hall of Fame resume building time for Jaylen Hurts. That may sound extreme.
Does sound extreme.
I don't think it is. It's the start of him building. I mean, his resume has started. It is building to this point. Perhaps it culminates in a Super Bowl championship, and that's as far as it ever goes. Perhaps he stays, he keeps the Eagles hugely competitive, and they are at least competing for championships again. I think it at least allows you to have that conversation around Jaylen Hurts.
Just because he won a Super Bowl? You start having Hall of Fame conversations?
Is that not the conversation around the Hall of Fame? Rings?
So if Jimmy G had completed that pass against the Chiefs and won the Super Bowl, we'd be talking about Hall of Fame? Like, I don't think every time a guy wins the Super Bowl, you
is
immediately
Jimmy Garoppolo, Jaylen Hurts.
Enter someone into the Hall of Fame discussion.
As Jimmy Garoppolo played, in fact, last night wasn't even, Bert brought this up in the commercial break, last night wasn't even Jaylen Hurts' best Super Bowl performance. His performance
he was better 2 years ago.
He has played in Super Bowls. He has been a key contributor in Super Bowls. He has been a major piece of one of the biggest franchises, one of the most famous franchises. He'll have media on his side, or at least if he continues to win at this rate, if he continues to build a resume, it's the start of the conversation.
I like Jaylen Hurts a lot. I really like Jaylen Hurts, the person, and his maturity and the way. And that's been the case for him since he was a freshman in college, and we all got to know him.
You can doubt him if you want to. He's been doubted at every turn. It is the start of the conversation. I'm not saying that he's a Hall of Famer because of last night. It is the start of the conversation around Jaylen Hurts. That is the legacy, the kind of space that vaults you into, right?
I suppose so.
It's also a legacy game for Vic Fangio.
It's a legacy game for all these guys, for sure.
Of course, but there are conversations. Vic Fangio, what's the difference between Steve Spagnuolo and Vic Fangio? Vic Fangio had a better head coaching career than Steve Spagnuolo did. Now they're both talked about as two elite coordinators at the top of their game, legendary coordinators who have, not necessarily succeeded at the head coach level, but can give your team an edge and were critical parts of winning a championship. Vic Fangio gets vaulted into a different category there, as does Nick Sirianni.
I guess Fangio was slightly more successful than Spagnuolo, but he never had a winning season.
Spags was really bad.
Never went to the playoffs. But yeah, no, for sure. Fangio getting a Super Bowl was a cool thing. And it's crazy how far down the list we go in this discussion before mentioning Saquon. Did Saquon Barkley wrap up the greatest single season by a running back in NFL history?
It is certainly an argument to be made. He's probably got as good an argument as anybody out there.
He definitely does. He broke the record.
Right. And he did. I mean, the only thing that people will probably nitpick as far as historical references, how many games did Saquon get to do it versus, when O.J. Simpson is rushing for 2,000 yards, when he was able to break the record.
Well, he broke Terrell Davis's record. So we look to Terrell Davis in that 1997 season where he had, my goodness, 581 yards in the postseason and 8 touchdowns in 97. He had over 1,700 yards in the regular season in 15 games. 4 games in the playoffs, 19 games for Terrell Davis in 1997. Saquon Barkley played 16 games in the regular season, 4 games. So he did it in 20. So he broke the record with 1 extra game. Man, that postseason run by Terrell Davis, that's just bonkers. I mean, Saquon had about 500 yards, so actually not that far off.
But at a time when the running back is the focal point.
Exactly. That's why I'm ready to say it is the greatest single season by a running back in NFL history. He has the yardage. He does have the 1 extra game. But the context of it all, of being let go from New York, going to a division rival, empowering a team. I mean, the Eagles made this conscious decision to lean on Saquon after a struggling start to the season, and it led them down a path to the Super Bowl, where they won, 10 games in a row in the regular season? I'm willing to say Saquon has had the best regular season, or the best season overall by a running back in NFL history, running the football.
So it culminated in a Super Bowl victory for the Eagles. Let's talk about the lessons, about team building, about tactics, what we learned from Super Bowl 59. That's next.
It is 12:01. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl 59 champions, 40-22, the final in New Orleans over the Kansas City Chiefs. Vic Fangio's defense stifling the Chiefs, turning them over 3 times, including a pick 6 by rookie defensive back Cooper DeJean. Patrick Mahomes sacked 6 times. Jaylen Hurts won Super Bowl MVP, going 17 of 22 for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns to go with 1 interception, plus 72 yards rushing and another score. In other NFL news, Adam Schefter reported this weekend the Jets are expected to part ways with quarterback Aaron Rodgers, with a formal announcement expected in the coming days. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour on this Monday. Thanks for jumping in. Hope your weekend was great. Hope your Super Bowl party was enjoyable, or if you just watched it in the comfort of your home, hope you had a great time watching the final football game of the 2024-2025 season. So we'll talk more about season themes tomorrow, but let's stick with the game for the time being. The question I want to ask you is this, whether you're a Titans fan, a Chiefs fan, an Eagles fan, or whatever. What's the biggest takeaway that you had from Super Bowl 59? General takeaway. It can be about quarterback play. It can be about roster construction. It can be about coaching. All of the above. Things of consequence that you're trying to apply to your favorite team. Most of you are Titans fans, but there's some people that are, we think we had an odd Chargers fan a couple of years ago call us. Probably thinking about how they can get past the Chiefs. Are the Chiefs gettable at this point in time after they got very much got last night by Philadelphia? Is that a one-off? Did Philly do the thing at the best possible time? When Mahomes is having a down game, they're going to have their best game or one of their best games of the season? Product of circumstance or something sustainable? There's a couple of things that I took away from last night's game that I think are applicable here as you think about all the different ways that the Titans are going to try and get back to relevance. First, meaningfully competitive, then talked about for wild card or divisional implications, and then, theoretically, trying to compete for a Super Bowl. My first one was, if you're a Titans fan, that's as good a game as you could hope to watch for your purposes. Now, it's not going to be easy to put together a roster as good as the Eagles, but what's the thing that we've been talking about leading up to this game? Well, can anybody stop the Chiefs? I know that they look stoppable. I know, is it real? Is it imagined? Is anybody capable of actually taking them out that's not Tom Brady at the top of the heap? Because that's the only person to stop Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl to date. But what were the common themes between the 2 Super Bowls that Patrick Mahomes has lost?
Well, I ate Hattie B's hot chicken during both of them.
Excellent work by you.
But apart from that, by the way, the Jumbo Wings won the watch party last night.
Did they?
Always.
They were the biggest hit.
And it was
unsurprising.
And it was a good spread, too. I mean, there was some good stuff there. Kimchi mac and cheese, which I did not know was a thing. Venison sausage, all sorts of good stuff. Hattie B's, by far the premier item on the menu.
Excellent.
The common thread between his 2 Super Bowl losses, they heated him up. And it was a different story in the Bucs game.
They didn't heat him up. They weren't blitzing. They just...
you can heat up a quarterback without blitzing. And the Eagles did last night.
It's pretty hard to do. What they've done, only 4 other teams in the history of next-gen stats tracking have done in any kind of a game, regular season, postseason, or otherwise.
But it's the way that they were, because that Bucs Super Bowl, unquestionably, the biggest advantage the Bucs had defensively was the pressure they were getting on Mahomes. Shaq Barrett, phenomenal in that game. But also, we came out of that game talking about Mahomes. How Mahomes did everything in his power. Mahomes running for his life, throwing across the body, drops. Tyreek Hill dropping a touchdown after Mahomes made one of the more incredible plays we've seen by a quarterback in a Super Bowl. That was not the story last night. The Eagles shut down every facet of his game. Even the Mahomes magic couldn't work around the pressure they were putting on him because of just the strength of their defensive backfield on top of all that.
So, you're right. because it's a much different dialogue this time around. I mean, last night they couldn't solve the Eagles' problems that they were presenting. The coverage was excellent. The pass rush was better. The two things combined completely undid the Chiefs until garbage time when the touchdowns didn't matter and Philadelphia is just trying to play out the stretch. My biggest takeaway, quarterback is still the most important thing to have because you still need guys to make good decisions, to elevate your roster, to put you in the best possible position to succeed, and then to be special, to have a moment on top of doing all of those things that are almost just required as a routine part of being competitive at the quarterback position. But if you don't have one of these guys, you can still compete for a Super Bowl. Jaylen Hurts is the what ranked quarterback in any given evaluation. Like
just in the NFL?
If you start at the top, like based on what his skill set is, Jaylen Hurts is how many? Let me ask you the question a different way. How many players on the Eagles roster are better at what they do than Jaylen Hurts is at playing quarterback?
Ooh. I mean, just on offense alone.
Saquon.
Yeah. AJ.
I mean, Lane Johnson is still an excellent right tackle.
Landon Dickerson, Devontae Smith.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how many offensive players would you get to before you got to Jaylen Hurts? Even though he gets a boost because he's the most important player and he has to distribute. But how often does Jaylen Hurts have to be the best player on the team? Not all the time. That's a product of excellent roster construction. Now, it's not easy to construct an excellent roster. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And, the Eagles are also benefiting from dopes like the Titans trade with A.J. Brown and benefiting from that. And where did they draft Josh Sweat? Or did they acquire?
Yeah, they drafted Sweat.
Okay. I thought there was another.
When did they draft? 2018 draft, I want to say.
Either way.
Yeah, he was a fourth rounder in 2018 out of Florida State.
The Eagles benefited from taking advantage of two teams that made bad decisions. It's the Giants and Saquon Barkley and the Titans and A.J. Brown. Those two things also combined with excellent roster construction helped put them over the top.
Almost entirely, their starting offensive lineup, Saquon from the Giants, A.J. from the Titans, Mekhi Becton was a Jet, and Jahan Dotson was a Commander. Everybody else was drafted.
Almost had a touchdown, Jahan Dotson.
Yes. He did. That would have been the blowout would have started a touch earlier if that had counted. But so almost entirely their offensive lineup drafted. Almost entirely their defense. I mean, who's the best player on their defense that was not drafted by the Eagles? Every major star on that defense. Jalen Carter, the insane rookie class.
It's.
I don't think C.J. Gardner-Johnson was.
Gardner-Johnson was drafted by the Lions?
By the Saints.
Okay.
But he was an Eagle, and then he was a Lion, and then he went back to the Eagles. So Gardner-Johnson lost the Super Bowl with the Eagles, spent 2023 with Detroit, and then went back to win with the Eagles.
So all that to say is that Philadelphia benefited from luck, but they largely made their own luck, right? They took advantage of opportunities that when they were there to be taken advantage of, and they also drafted excellently. Darius Slay is the best player that they did not draft on defense. They put their quarterback in a position to succeed. Maybe not every quarterback would succeed in, because what did we talk about earlier? What is unique to Jaylen Hurts? His competitive toughness, his ability. I think the tush push is largely or brotherly shove or whatever you want to call it. How many quarterbacks in the NFL can squat 600 pounds like Jaylen Hurts can? Not every one of them.
I mean, he was doing that like in college.
So there's some specific things to Jaylen Hurts there that you also have to get the quarterback right. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking that you can just have, respectfully to Trent Dilfer, who is also a Super Bowl champion, that you can just trot out a Trent Dilfer there and expect to win a Super Bowl if your team is good enough. Because they also got one of the worst Mahomes games. They forced one of the worst Mahomes games, but he didn't problem solve the way that you expect him to throughout the course of that game until it was well out of hand. What I learned last night is the best opportunity to compete for a Super Bowl, or the best strategy to compete for a Super Bowl in today's AFC, is to find ways to humanize these superstar quarterbacks. You still have to get the quarterback position right. The quarterback plan has to be the thing that you're doing all of these other things in service of. But there's a separation here between Titans fans, what Titans fans want, or what I think Titans fans want, versus how the organization can afford to act. If you're Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, can you afford to have a little more patience with the quarterback solution en route to putting the quarterback solution in the best possible position to succeed?
That seems to be the strategy they're building out right now.
Right, which is opposed to how a lot of Titans fans, I don't know if it's a majority, and I don't know what the percentages are. I mean, we could do a Twitter poll, but those things are unscientific. There are a lot of Titans fans that are impatient. They're over it. They're tired of waiting. They're tired of being told that, no, this is not a good enough quarterback class for you to take the number 1 overall pick at quarterback. This is not the best year. It's a bad year to be this bad. These kind of things, right? They're tired of that narrative. They want a quarterback. Quarterbacks are more exciting. Quarterbacks bring the most amount of hope. Quarterbacks are just generally a sexier topic, a more interesting topic. Then, yeah, you need a better offensive line than the one that you got right now. You need a better defensive line than the one that you got right now. There's an edge rusher. There's a tackle. There's a couple of different players where you've drafted multiple players at those positions. And to date, you've still played a game where your defense got 9 sacks. Titans fans could argue this better than anybody. Your defense got 9 sacks against Joe Burrow and still lost. Like, you still have to have the quarterback right. There's no perfect solution to any of this. But I think in the absence of hoping and praying and wishing that one of these guys turns into Lamar or Allen or Burrow or Pat, that the best possible team is the solution here as opposed to putting it all and hoping that quarterback ends up being better than the rest of the quarterbacks. Does not mean that you cannot draft a quarterback this year. But the opportunity cost, the evaluation has to be, if you're the Titans, am I going to get, obviously, a quarterback that's better than the rest of these quarterbacks, or can I build the best possible team and have a better team than the Eagles, than the Chiefs, Ravens? I mean, hell, just start with the Texans. Getting a better roster than the Texans would be a good start. Winning your division would be a good start. It's been a while. I don't know how Titans fans are going to feel about that. There may be some people that I wouldn't be able to move off that position, and I would be completely understanding, because it's been 25 years since you've sniffed a Super Bowl. Well, I guess 19 you sniffed it. You got into the game before the game, but that tailed off certainly in the second half, that feeling of closeness to the Super Bowl.
You've had that feeling on multiple occasions. You had that feeling in 2008 when you went 13-3 and lost in the divisional round. You had that feeling when you made the AFC Championship. You had that feeling in 2021 when you lost in the divisional round as the 1 seed. But those teams all had well-rounded rosters and were not carried to the postseason by a quarterback.
It's just, listen, I'm not diminishing quarterback. And I'm not even diminishing these quarterbacks. Again, I have no idea how they're graded by these teams and how good they're going to become. None of us, not even the teams, can answer that question. They may be the solution. But if they're definitively not, or if you're not 90%, 85% certain that they can be that kind of a solution, then you have to think about building the best possible team and making the quarterback situation a little more trial and error. And I don't think Titans fans would be good with that if I presented that on face value. But there is some merit to the idea of roster building that way en route to building up to the point where you can legit take a shot at one of these top teams, not just in your division, but in the AFC.
And make a move for a quarterback. You don't have to bottom out to get a quarterback. The Chiefs didn't bottom out to get Mahomes. The Bills didn't bottom out to get Allen. So
Correct.
That is a misconception I hope we can move on from.
Correct. It does present you the best possible jumpstart opportunity, but it depends on what's there. 615-737-1045. We'll take your phone calls on this coming up next. Also, Abdul Carter has chimed in on a message from Jaylen Hurts, the Super Bowl MVP last night. Why should Titans fans be interested? We'll talk about it. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Trajan Wealth is here to help you. Their team is here to help you get on the right financial track and to guide you through the process of planning out your financial future. Because you've definitely asked yourself at some point, will I have enough money when I retire? When should I start to draw from Social Security? If these questions are keeping you up at night, the Trajan Wealth team is here to help. That's TRAJAN Wealth. Trajan Wealth is not just any financial firm. They are your partners in securing your financial future. They are not just a fiduciary firm. They're a family-owned, veteran-led team that puts your needs first. Let their decades of experience specializing in retirement planning and wealth management work for you. Trajan Wealth offers free consultations to help you develop your plan and your peace of mind. So call them today at 615-270-5000. That's 615-270-5000, or visit them online at trajanwealth.com. Trajan Wealth advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This is a paid advertisement.
And now they're in the quarterback sneak formation. The tush push from the 1, 1st and goal, Eagles. And under center's the quarterback, Hurts. He gets the snap. They shove him across. It is an Eagle touchdown. And there is your first score in Super Bowl 59.
Kevin Harlan on the call, Westwood One. You can always hear the Super Bowl, Westwood One's coverage of the Super Bowl here on 104.5 The Zone. Eagles dominate 40-22. We've talked about it. Not that close. We've tried to parse what can be learned, what's applicable, what's just happenstance, because there's plenty of that too. Eagles played in every phase, arguably their best game of the season. It was an excellent team effort. Chiefs played one of their worst games of the season, one of the worst games of the Patrick Mahomes era, and both of those two things happened at the same time and allowed the Eagles to dominate.
The Chiefs are the only team in the NFL this season to go their first 9 drives in a game without crossing midfield.
It's crazy. Crazy. And that happened in the Super Bowl. So, Jaylen Hurts, we played this audio in the first or second hour, I can't remember, but we've played this audio already today. I do think it's worth revisiting because of the conversation around quarterbacks. Titans have the number 1 overall pick. Should it just be a surefire thing? Yeah, you take a quarterback because quarterback is your biggest advantage or the most important thing to get right. Or do you try and build the best possible roster around a quarterback and give yourself a little more patience in the quarterback solution process? You can approach these things both ways. When you're 3-14, I don't know that there's necessarily a wrong answer. It's circumstantial to whatever team you're talking about. What we're talking about right now is the 2025, soon to be the 2025 Tennessee Titans. So, Jaylen Hurts, after the game, he wins the Super Bowl MVP, but he's asked specifically about the performance of his defense that neutralized the Kansas City Chiefs on offense, which happens almost never. This was Jaylen Hurts last night.
It definitely took a team effort, took a group effort, and only thing I can think about is all the effort, all the work that was put in over the course of time. And I think we had a focused group out there. Offense was able to score points, to take advantage of opportunities, just enough to put points on the board, and then defense played their ass off. They played how they played all year, and I truly believe offense wins the game, but defense wins championships, and how that defense has been able to play. It's a great testament to them. Like I said, it's only the beginning until it's the end, and the end ain't coming anytime soon.
So Jaylen Hurts praising the defense, rightfully so. Vic Fangio's defense did not blitz once, consistently pressured Patrick Mahomes, had 16 total pressures on him, sacked him 6 times, it's the most in his career, put him in a complete pretzel for the first half of football. And if you have watched Chiefs games with Patrick Mahomes under center, you probably looked at that halftime margin and said, yeah, but they're the Chiefs, they're not dead. Except they were. We just didn't know it yet. So does that inform how other teams should strategize trying to solve the Mahomes problem? The Eagles solved the Mahomes problem. Only the Bengals, pre-Super Bowl, the Bucs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl have been able to solve the Mahomes problem.
In the playoffs.
In the playoffs. Titans have gotten Mahomes a couple of times in the regular season, and they've done it in a similar way. But this is the most important game of the year, and it's going to carry greater weight, especially when you have some of the themes coming out of this that you do. From my standpoint, I am team trade out, pending what the offers look like. We won't know that, of course, until a deal is done, if a deal gets done. I'm not overwhelmingly in love with the quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean that the Titans can't be or shouldn't be. They have their own evaluation versus mine, just watching games and marrying it with what I think is going to make them the most competitive. Not necessarily right away, but the most long-term competitive, the most sustainably competitive. I don't have a problem with the quarterbacks. I just don't love the idea of one of these quarterbacks at number 1 when you have as many roster holes as you do. I think the thing that we learned most from this Super Bowl or this postseason is as effectively as you can bother the quarterback, you give yourself the best possible chance to succeed. because no quarterback in the NFL, even the special ones, there's 4 or 5 of them in any given season, none of them are immune to the kind of pressure that Mahomes was under last night. Not Lamar, not Allen. They can find ways to negate it. They can still make special plays because they are special players. But on aggregate, you're asking your quarterback to be the best player on the team every game. That's not always sustainable. It can be sometimes if you've got one of the guys. But there's 4 or 5 teams that have one of those guys. Everybody else has to figure it out in the interim.
Well, even the way the Chiefs got to the Super Bowl, right? They got a stop on Pat Mahomes. They heated him up at the right time and got off the field after failing to score a touchdown with the offense led by Patrick Mahomes. The defense has been the catalyst for the Chiefs in the last 2 years. It's just Mahomes doing what he does in the right moments. You mentioned the tweet by Abdul Carter last night. Defense wins championships.
Quoting Jaylen Hurts.
Yep. And then he just says, number 1 overall pick, 74 days. With, I believe, is it an infinity emoji?
Yes.
And then like what do you call like the rock and roll, like hand motion when you have the pinky finger and
rock on.
The rock on motion, is that what you, anyway?
I think so. Isn't that rock on?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I see. You know, when you're at a rock and roll concert and
turn it upside down, it turns down.
He put that emoji up there.
Excellent explanation of the internet by you.
Yeah, this is the Internet 101 from 10 to 1.
You're doing great.
Daniel Jeremiah, who is he's up there. I mean, he's the top 3 for me of the draft analysts that I enjoy reading and watching the most. Comes from the world of scouting. He's not necessarily a hot takey. Not that a lot of them are, but I don't know. Mel Kiper's the godfather, but then you have him saying things like, ban 2 high safety looks in the NFL. But Daniel Jeremiah is somebody I very much enjoy, and he put out his big board. His first big board of this pre-draft process had, who at number 1?
Abdul Carter.
Abdul Carter.
He's the best player in the draft to me.
I agree. He's the best player in the draft to me. But I was curious because there are comparisons with Micah Parsons, who obviously also went to Penn State. Mm-hmm. So I went back and I read Daniel Jeremiah's big board, a big board he put out in April, so later in the draft process in 2021, before Parsons was drafted. Now, he ranked Micah Parsons the number 12 player. In the 2021 draft, Micah Parsons was drafted at number 12 overall to the Dallas Cowboys. Jeremiah wrote, Parsons has a big athletic frame, possesses excellent speed and versatility. He is quick to key/read before attacking the line of scrimmage, can defeat blocks with his hands or use his quickness to slip past them. He has the speed to make plays sideline to sideline, and although there were a few occasions where he overran the football in the games I studied, he also had some issues sniffing out the ball on zone reads. Very gifted in coverage versus tight ends and running backs. He has timing and burst as a blitzer overall. There aren't many holes in his game. It is difficult to find linebackers with his size and ability to impact the passing game. So, overwhelming praise about his size, his athleticism, his speed off the edge, with some questions about his ability to key and diagnose as a defender. Micah Parsons obviously hasn't had a season with less than 12 sacks in his NFL career. His best season at Penn State, 5 sacks. Micah Parsons.
He was a projection.
Absolutely.
He was a projection because there was some question as to position as well. And he's been deployed in a variety of different roles since he's been with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys have tried to get creative with him. He's a high-level enough athlete that you could certainly try things, but obviously his best role is rushing off the edge.
Yeah, and a bit of a projection.
He was a projection in the draft process. I do remember that.
For all the criticisms of Jerry Jones, that's one that he nailed. But here is Daniel Jeremiah's read on...
Let's say his team nailed it.
Sure.
I don't want to give Jerry all the credit for that.
Jeremiah's big board, the first one of this pre-draft process, had Abdul Carter, number 1 overall. He writes, Carter is an electric edge rusher. He has average height and bulk, unlike Micah Parsons, I add parenthetically, but he has an elite in all caps, burst, and his ability to flatten at the top of his rush is special. He gets a lot of early wins because of that speed. He also has a nifty swipe/rip move. If tackles overset, he senses it early and crosses their face for immediate pressures and sacks. He also has a natural ability to retrace underneath when QBs climb the pocket to avoid him. He can press out and control tight ends at the point of attack. He's a blur when chasing plays down on the backside. Overall, Carter can take over and completely wreck an offensive game plan. He demands attention on every snap, and that is going to free up everyone else around him. Not one bad thing, not one asterisk in there from Daniel Jeremiah for Abdul Carter, who had a far more productive college career than Micah Parsons and had 12 sacks this past season.
Now, let's say this. That does not mean that Abdul Carter will be Micah Parsons or better than Micah Parsons. But what it does mean is it's less of a guessing game with Abdul Carter than it was with Micah Parsons at the time. That's a more known commodity.
And what's more of a guessing game for this conversation, Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter?
It's definitely Travis Hunter.
I have more questions about Travis Hunter. Phenomenal player. You could argue he's the best player in this draft.
He is the definition of generational.
Mm-hmm. Because he's done something we've never seen.
But he is a generational college player.
Yep.
And that does not mean that it will make him a generational NFL player. It could. He's a special, special talent.
The question that we're going to be trying to figure out about Hunter is, okay, if he was just a receiver or just a corner, would he still be in this conversation?
And I do think he benefit. This is it's not like an awful wide receiver class by any stretch of the imagination, but there's not a bunch of first-round wide receivers running around out there.
No, you're right. It's not as good as maybe I thought it would be going into last college football season.
Luther Burden didn't have as good a season.
Yeah.
This season. Again, didn't have a bad season, but it's more of a conversation than I thought it would be, to your point.
Tez Johnson is the stud out of Oregon. Had a phenomenal Senior Bowl. People are raving about him.
So small, though.
So small, but who did we have on, Jackson? I think Buck was gone. Oh, no, I was with Blaine when we had Zach on. Or maybe it was Coach Mack. Actually, it might have been Coach Mack talking about who was it? Zay Flowers.
The fact that you can't remember who you were talking to and who you were talking with makes me think that you're just making all of this up at this point.
Maybe. Tank Dell kind of debunking that stuff.
Sure.
Like teams no longer being afraid of a 5'10 receiver if he brings that kind of element.
It's the weight.
Sure. But all that to say, I thought Evan Stewart was going to be the guy out of Oregon this year, and he's coming back for another year. So wide receiver class, not as good as I previously thought. Travis Hunter, if you're getting a 2-for-1 and you're that confident you're getting a 2-for-1, even if it's a wide receiver that can play situationally at corner or vice versa, then that's probably worth the top pick. But it is so intriguing to me to trade back to 3 and still potentially get the best player in this draft in Abdul Carter that can wreck a game for you immediately. Even Travis Hunter, if he's playing receiver, is dependent on other people to immediately tilt a game into your advantage.
Honestly, quarterback is more dependent than the pass rusher because you need an offensive line group that's viable, league average, to just function. And Tennessee is still a work in progress in that area as well. It's a really hard thing to kind of parse. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a definitively right or wrong answer right now. But just based on what you're up against, what gives you the best percentage chance to compete with some of these teams? You have Jeffrey Simmons under contract for a couple more years. You've got Harold Landry, even though you can get out from under Harold's contract if something more viable comes your way. Arden Key is still under contract for one more year. I would love to see them add to that group, including Tavondre Sweat, who, conditioning, not an issue, doesn't have to come off the field that often. We'll see if he develops legitimate pass rush stuff the way that he has the potential to, but right now he's a quality player that you feel good about, but you need something to spark that defense. You need to be special in some department. And there's not a department where the Titans are truly special in. Abdul Carter could take that pass rush to the next level because they're one of the worst pass rushers in the league last year. And if you can't have a sure thing as the next Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, or Lamar, then the best way to stop those guys is to get the kind of players that stop those guys for a living, the kind of players that just stop Mahomes dead in his tracks in the Super Bowl. Abdul Carter feels like he could be the most sure thing in this draft class, where it's the draft. There are no such thing as sure things. And I even hesitate to say that. But by percentage chance, it feels that way for all the different variables that you could account for. 615-737-1045 is how you chime in. We'll get to your phone calls here in just a second. A quick reminder that 1045 The Zone is going to be doing the Music City Polar Plunge on Saturday, February 22nd. The Music City Polar Plunge is where participants take a chili dip to support Special Olympics of Tennessee. It helps provide year-round sports training, competitions, and inclusive programming for over 18,000 athletes with intellectual disabilities in the state of Tennessee. For more information, visit 1045thezone.com/events and donate to a great cause in the Special Olympics of Tennessee today. Let's start with Darrington.
Morning, my good friends.
Yep.
Early in the segment, you was talking about the Saquon thing, and they were going to have an argument about it. It took him more games. I hope people realize that everybody that had a record that it got an extra game. When you look back at it over time, OJ, then Eric Dickerson, they all had a game added on after, because OJ got a game added on before Jim Brown, and then so and so and so. So I don't want to hear nothing about how many games it took them. It's just how it goes. Lucas, Buck was talking about Jaylen Hurts possibly going to the working on his Hall of Fame career. Last time I checked, they got a guy by the name of Eli Manning possibly going to the Hall of Fame because he beat Tom Brady twice. If you look at his regular season numbers, they're terrible. Now, last time I heard, I have never heard nobody not say that Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Last time I checked, Jaylen Hurts got something they don't get, and that's the Super Bowl. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day.
Thanks for the call.
Fair enough. I know. I think terrible in the regular season is a bit of a stretch. Eli had some pretty good seasons.
He never wowed you.
But yeah, look, if Jaylen Hurts has a 16-year career and wins another Super Bowl, then absolutely. And I get that that's the first step. But is Jaylen Hurts the fifth best quarterback in the NFL right now? Sixth? You have the top four. You have the clear-cut top four.
He's the best quarterback in the NFC.
Sure.
So that would make him the fifth best quarterback.
You put him over Stafford?
Just because of where they are. Stafford is still good, but yeah, I would put him over Stafford.
Okay. I think it's extreme to get into the Hall of Fame discussion on Hurts at the moment. But if he keeps doing this...
It's not is he a Hall of Famer? Has
he taken that first step?
He is building towards a Hall of Fame resume. We have not jumped to conclusions on Jaylen Hurts. I think it is a fair conversation to start to have.
I guess you could say that about any quarterback that wins a Super Bowl.
Yes. Especially if you're going to talk about guys who are locks who haven't won a Super Bowl. And there are some of those running around out there at this point in time. Dylan is next.
Hey, guys. I have a quick question for you. It's kind of a two-parter. What would you say if Will Levis was in this draft class? Would you say that he would be above Shedeur and Cam? Do you think it would be even close? And if it is even close, my second thing is it not an absolute disaster for the Titans to look after seeing what happened with them drafting Will Levis? I'm going to hang up and listen to you guys.
I didn't really get the second part of his question. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, if it's even close to the two, you've seen the disaster that the pick of Will Levis.
Oh, okay. I've got you.
Levis as a prospect compared to these two as a prospect.
Thanks for the call. Okay.
If it's close, stay away is what he's saying.
Both of them were better college quarterbacks than Will Levis was.
But would they be better prospects?
They would not. It's probably close between Ward because of the traits. But here's the thing. What is as important of a trait to have as the physical stuff? Do you make good decisions? And with Will Levis, they tried it. He hasn't made good decisions. Perhaps he will learn. Perhaps he'll turn a corner. Perhaps he'll even out as his NFL career progresses, because I don't think just because it went full nightmare mode for Will Levis this year that his NFL career is done. But traits-wise, he's got higher level traits than Shedeur, for example. There's a conversation to be had about him and Cam Ward. Both of them were more successful than Levis was as a college quarterback. An NFL team would probably he would be in the discussion for the first round this year, where clearly and obviously there is not another discussion for a first round quarterback.
Yeah, he was in the discussion for the first round. I mean, he came to the draft. You don't show up to the draft unless you're pretty confident your name's going to be called.
He was a Titans-Vikings trade away from being a first round pick.
Yeah.
More of your phone calls coming up next. Last call for phone calls for us. And if you don't get in with us, obviously Blaine and Zach, 3HL coming up next. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Shotgun snap to Hurts, left tackle block, line drive throw, caught on the 5. A.J. Brown hits the pylon far side. Touchdown, Philadelphia. They're destroying the Chiefs.
They did indeed. Philadelphia destroyed Kansas City by a score of 40-22. Really we should be talking about it as 40-6, but the final score is 40-22. That was Kevin Harlan's call for Westwood 1 of A.J. Brown's touchdown, one of several that the Eagles scored due to Kansas City Chiefs turnovers and advantageous field position and just generally being the better team. Most people, though, did not hear the Westwood Run broadcast. Most people probably watched the Super Bowl in a conventional fashion. And that's something I want to touch on here, too, because we haven't talked about the broadcast or the halftime show, because I think that's the least relevant thing out of today's conversation, and there's still good football to discuss. We'll get to that here in just a second. Phone calls before we wrap up for the day. Jose is next.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
So I'm an old school NFL fan. I used to love the week after the Super Bowl when they played the NFC, AFC Pro Bowl game. Will we ever see that game come back? And it was very competitive. It was very good to watch. You get to see all the stars actually play a football game. This thing they doing now, this little challenge stuff, I hate that. Will we ever see the Pro Bowl come back? I'll hang up and listen.
Not in that form, no. This is what the Pro Bowl is going to be.
Too much money.
It's
too much money on the line.
You got to turn your microphone on.
My mic was on.
Whose fault is that?
No, it wasn't. It was his fault.
Let's go to Bruce.
Hey, guys. How's it going today?
Good.
What a game. Hey, I want to talk about team building. My head's been exploding ever since we got the first-round draft pick, and everybody's talking quarterback. And the whole time I'm thinking team. You know, when Brady went down to Tampa Bay, he didn't go there to help them rebuild. They already had a team. And I think that's what the Titans need to focus on. And you guys have been talking about it, so that's why I wanted to call in, because I agree. We need to get the best players. We need to have the best probability of having a good team. You could blow up on a quarterback easy. You can get a quarterback and blow your first-round draft pick, and now where are you? I mean, now you got another bad quarterback. Whereas if you play it safe and you're going edge rushers, you're going offensive line, you're doing that stuff that helps even an average quarterback be a better quarterback, then I think we're in a lot better position. And I really hope they do that.
Thanks for the call, Bruce. Yeah, again, there's going to be multiple schools of thought, and we'll just have to wait and see when how they play this thing out. Tim will be our last call of the day. Hey, Tim.
Hey, good afternoon. Y'all want to hear something that'll make the fan base jump in 2025?
Sure.
Listen to this. You know, Harold Landry's stats was down, this past season. So here's my dream scenario. I'm going to start with first for free agents. Trade Harold Landry to Detroit. Bring Hendon Hooker back home. Bring in Trey Smith to block for him at free agency. Sign T. Higgins. Draft that dual Carter with number 1, and then the second round, bring Hendon Hooker, his teammate, back. Bring McCoy. I'll hang up and listen.
You forgot the Go Vols part of that.
Yeah, we'll sign Cedric Tillman while we're at it. Jalen Hyatt hasn't been doing much in New York.
Is Jaylen Hurts still in the NFL?
He's a tight end now, didn't you know? No, I think he's been out for a while. I mean, the Hendon Hooker thing. Listen, Hendon Hooker got replaced by Teddy Bridgewater, who did not play a full season of NFL quarterback, was coaching a Miami high school to a championship, then came off the bench and took Hendon Hooker's job. So, I'm not...
They're hanging on to him up there, but I didn't love that they had to go get Teddy Bridgewater.
It's just whatever.
Yeah.
But there's, again, it's the offseason. It's the fun of the offseason. You can throw a bunch of different stuff at the wall, and people can tell you you're wrong or that that's not appropriate, and it doesn't matter because we still have a couple of weeks, or rather months at this point, to see how this all plays out. Quickly, the game broadcast. At least the most productive thing that I got out of Tom Brady last night was Patrick Mahomes talking about his footwork, how uncomfortable he was. But beyond that, I didn't think Brady brought much of anything besides a $740,000 watch to the broadcast. I have never done commentary like as a game analyst for a football game. So I'm going to ask you, play-by-play guy, what is the degree of difficulty? How fair is my criticism of Tom Brady today?
Well, fair, because he's being put in the highest possible spot that a person in that job can be placed in. And I think there's an argument that the person he's replacing, he is worse than. I would have rather heard Greg Olsen.
He's more famous, but he's worse.
Yeah, I'm not learning a lot with Brady up there. And this is a tough thing. He got placed into the highest possible stage and said, all right, now do it.
Yep.
Jason Witten, Monday Night Football, right?
He's
tough
not as bad as Jason Witten, yeah.
Tough situation. Yep. Jason Witten got placed on the biggest primetime game of the NFL regular season and said, okay, go, be a broadcaster. Same thing with Brady, but with the price tag, and there's a lot around it. The fact that he's a part owner in the NFL, and I'm just not learning a lot. I think he'll get better as it goes on. I think everybody's been waiting for, now since Tony Romo just took it and ran with it.
Yeah,
there's an expectation.
Romo.
Sure, but there's an expectation. You put a guy in the booth, either you're good or you're not. No, these things take time. I think Brady will need to improve, but. Yeah, I felt for Greg Olsen during that whole situation. One thing that I took issue with, the green screen. What was up with the green screen with Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady?
Oh, I didn't really pay attention to that.
They had this green screen, like they were in the French Quarter.
Most people were upset about the score bug.
Yeah, the score bug always.
It's whatever.
Yeah, but the green screen had them like in the French Quarter, like on Bourbon Street. It's like, you're at the game. I didn't understand that.
And then the other part of this is the halftime show. I guess we'll do that instead of polls. People were pissed about the halftime show. People enjoyed the halftime show. I think if you were in on some of the messaging that Kendrick Lamar was producing, the fact that he looked into the camera, did the Drake bit anyway, while being sued by Drake, simply left out the word pedophile while still wearing an A minor chain referencing his alleged Drake pedophilia allegations. The A minor chain set it over the top for me. I thought it was great. I like Kendrick Lamar, though. For some reason, I got it in my head that most people like Kendrick Lamar. Clearly, that was not the case based on the reaction of Twitter. It's not like Twitter knows anything. Twitter has neither taste nor class, so I'm not really concerned about what Twitter thinks. But it was basically like, are you over 35? If yes, you didn't like the halftime show. Are you under 35? If yes, you enjoyed the halftime show.
We put it to the one poll we'll read was, what did you think of Kendrick Lamar's halftime show? 42.5% say it was fine. 37.7% hated it. 19.9% loved it. Personally,
I thought it was fine.
It was fine.
I thought it was good. I thought it was well executed. I liked seeing Serena Williams out there.
That was cool. If you're into the Kendrick Drake beef, then but not a lot of people are that in tune with it. So it was like the whole halftime show was a big middle finger at Drake. And so it's like, if you're not,
which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Sure. But if you weren't like keeping up with all that, then you're like, I don't really care about this beef. But it was obviously theatrical, and he's a poet. He's unbelievably talented. The only complaint I had was I would have loved to hear some Good Kid, Mad City stuff, like older Kendrick.
Yeah, but that's never really what happens at the Super Bowl. Normally, they got a new album. They're going to do their new album.
Rihanna got up there and sang every smash hit she's ever had.
Rihanna hasn't put out a new album.
I know.
God knows how long.
I wanted to hear the old stuff.
The way Kendrick said Drake's name.
Looked into the camera.
And had an unhinged smile on his face.
Oh, it was so good.
Made the whole show for me.
Made the show for me. So like I said, if you were in on the themes, if you were in on the bit, you enjoyed it. Right. If you like Kendrick Lamar, you enjoyed it. And then I just had my national reminder that, not everybody has the same musical taste. And people called it a disgrace to music and then spelled disgrace wrong in my comments, which made me laugh.
Halftime show opinions have to be so extreme every year.
See you tomorrow.